So I'm going to start the public hearing. We're continuing the public hearing from last month. That would be July what? Was that, Julie? You got to help me out.
That was July 28th.
Yes. So we're going to begin the continuance of the public hearing from July 28th. I'll call to order. Is everybody here? Rob, you want to start?
Hi, I'm Rob Horrigan.
Andy.
John Smoliga.
Sue Fitch.
Andy, you there?
Yeah, I said I was here.
Okay.
Andy Engel, for the record.
And
Okay, we
that's
do
it.
have a quorum. John, you stepped down, correct?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go to the back of the room.
Wish I could come with you.
There might be beer back there.
I'm sure there is. Okay, so Julie, Karen, you're on. Would you read the date of the public notice that went out for this continued hearing?
Yes, of course. The public notice was first published on July 31st, and we added the Zoom virtual meeting information on August 11th. So we were well within the timeframes that we were supposed to be.
Okay,
And
so
you want me to just read the first paragraph?
go ahead.
Okay. A public hearing is hereby notified. The public is hereby notified that the Roxbury Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission opened a virtual public hearing on Tuesday, July 28th, 2020, and will continue it on Tuesday, August 25th, 2020 at 7 p.m.
Thank you. And
You're
this
welcome.
is a public hearing, the second public hearing for the Woods proposal for 6 lots on 64 acres on Route 199. That would be North Street in Roxbury, Connecticut. I want to start out by, is Gail on? Gail McTaggart?
I don't think we've seen Gail yet.
Let me do.
That's okay. That's okay. We're good. So I want to start out because, Paul, you mentioned as the intervener last meeting that you hope the Wetland Commission will make the right decision, and that I was friends with Jill, which I divulged straight out. First meeting, didn't try to hide anything. And I want to explain why Jill and I became, I shouldn't say friends, I've known her less than a year. We're acquaintances, but why that happened. And Paul, you're well aware of it. It happened because I tried to get all the parties together to save these 2 parcels, to conserve them. I offered to go to the Board of Selectmen and ask for some money from the Land Acquisition Fund, of which there's 700,000. Obviously, I wouldn't ask for it all, but there's money there to conserve land. And the town doesn't want to buy land and own it unless it's in the middle of the town. And Jill called me up one day and asked me after the appeal if I would come and meet with her and explain to her the denial. And I did. I went down to her farm in Southbury, which is a lovely place. And I love animals, and we had a good meeting. She understood why we denied it. And I asked her if she was willing to negotiate to conserve it. And she said yes. And then I went and met with the Land Trust, Ann and Brian Duda. Not Ann and Brian Duda, but Ann and Brian. And saw if the Land Trust would be interested. They explained to me their problems, that they're, the Land Trust is really set up for donations, not really paying millions of dollars for properties. And people tell me they have a lot of money, but I know that they need a lot of money to keep their operations going, to maintain what they have, to pay people. And then I met with Weantanog, which is the Northwest Conservation, or Northwest, I think they changed their name. And I tried to get a deal together. I tried to get all the people who were concerned about this property, including you, Margaret. I tried to get you all together. I wanted you to buy the west side first and then work from there. And you had a meeting, which I was not a part of. And you decided you wanted it all or nothing. And you made an offer. The land trust made an offer. I think Leanne and I made the offer. And apparently the offer was below what the developer was needed. And developers don't buy property to lose money or to give them away to charity. Although some do, this is not the case. In that time, I got to know Jill, and Jill's a great person. She really is. I have a lot of respect for her. She's a strong woman. I respect strong women because I was raised by one. And we don't go out, we don't hang out. We just became acquaintances. And as soon as the West Side came in, the conversation stopped. And when it was over, we know each other. And that's all it is. It's nothing more. Now, to say that I don't have a good way of making an honest decision after serving 25 years on this commission and fighting like hell to save the Chippewa River and fighting very hard to try to save these properties is not fair. You mustn't know me if you don't know I can't make a decision. Barbara Henry is not only my friend, she's the sister I never had. If you look at our record, I vote. If somebody votes against what Barbara wants, it's me. And usually it's a budget item. One year, her husband, a friend of mine, who brought me to the hospital when I cracked my shoulder open, he bid on painting the senior center. He wasn't the low bid. He was the second bid by $500. I voted for the low bid. I do what I have to do. And I did tell Jill at the time, way back when, that if I ever have to vote on an application that comes before me, our friendship or our acquaintance will never get in the way, because I'm going to vote what the data is, what the science is. I don't need friends. Believe me, I have a lot of great friends. I'm very fortunate. So with that, because of my discussions with Gail, I want to know from the commission if they're uncomfortable with me staying on the commission, knowing what I just told you. Should I step down? Because if the commission feels I should, believe me, you'd be doing me a favor. I won't be mad at you, because I'm looking at that pole out there and my dog waiting for me to jump in. If the commission's uncomfortable because I have an acquaintance with Jill and Raj, and that all started from trying to conserve this land, then please let me know. Rob?
Before you,
Russ, I've known you a long time, and I have no issue with you sitting on this case. I'm certain that you can be impartial.
Rob?
Russ, I have no issue with you sitting on this at all.
Sue?
Russ, I have no issue. I've been on the commission for a number of years, and I have not seen it be a problem for you. You're typically fighting for what's right for the town and the property, and respecting the property owners too, but I have no issue.
because I think that your takeaway from what I said was not what I intended. And I brought up the notes from what I said last time, and I'd like to reread the last sentence. The chairman indicated his friendship with Ms. Sloan, but has decided not to recuse himself. I have every confidence that he and the rest of the board will assess these plans with impartiality and on their merits, balancing the equities of development and protection without regard to friendships and without a belief that Ms. Sloan should be approved because she was previously married. Nowhere did I say or meant to imply that I had the slightest doubt that you would behave in that manner. I never used the word hope.
Okay, Paul, good. We're all straight then, because I like to be straight up. I don't want to waste anybody's time here. Everybody's put a lot of time, effort, and money into this. I don't want to waste anybody's time. So if there's a problem, I wanted to know now. And if I had to step down, I would gladly do so without it thinking twice. But good, let's move forward then. And thank you, Paul. I wish my things were working here because I can't, it's hard to hear certain people. It's from listening to rock and roll. So I want to bring up some things at the last public hearing that I want to get on the record. I have to admit Zoom is very hard, and I thank Karen and Julie. They're part-time people, and it's hard. It's hard to run these things through Zoom. I was on 8 Zoom conferences today. I'm pretty tired, but it's hard. And I wish I had all my papers in front of me. But I want to make sure we do this right. And I want to make sure that the commission has read everything that is on the list that Karen sent today. Karen, would you read the list of documents? And Marjorie, if we've missed anything, or Mark, would you please let us know?
Russ, should I start with the new entries that came in the last 48 hours? Or do
No,
you want the whole
start
list?
with the old and then with the new.
The old list, okay, the
Yeah.
original list. Okay, here we go. This is listed on the town website under the Woods Roxbury LLC documentation. These first ones that I'm going to read have been posted since the last meeting. Okay, the Woods Roxbury LLC Inland Wetlands Commission application. The Woods Subdivision Civil Plan Set. The Woods Drainage Report Part 1. The Woods Drainage Report Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, Part 6, Part 7. The Woods Drainage Report Part 8. William Kenny Associates Letter. Virtual public hearing legal notice, July 16. Corax, the Woods letter. Corax, the Woods 22A to 19. Manson, 2020. Review letter. Trinkus engineering letter. Highly erodible soils map. The Woods sightlines letter. The Woods River Alliance of Connecticut letter. The Woods Marjorie Shansky letter. The Woods Questions and Concerns Sue Kerner letter. Okay, now we're going to the new information that has come in the last 48 hours. Dymar Engineers, cut and fill earthwork drawing. Mark Landcore, professional biography. Down to Earth Consulting, Raymond P. Gennario resume. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. William Kenny resume, Down to Earth Consulting, and they submitted a rock excavation recommendation and control measures. From Margaret Miner, Woods testimony, August 25th. Margaret Miner, SWCD independent report, Monroe IWC. Trinkus, the Woods follow-up review. Manson, 2020 plan, second plan, review letter by Michael Klein. Under Mr. Kenny, total proposed impervious cover box maps. I believe there were 2 maps with that. 4530 construction disturbance plan. 3656 total proposed impervious cover plan. 3380 total proposed impervious cover plan. That's the end of it.
All right, everybody, is that it? Do we have everything? Now, not everything may have been posted online. Our cutoff is Thursday. If you submit things after Thursday, it's not going to get posted,
Yeah.
or it's going to be rough. And I'm not having Jimmy and Karen and Julie run around anymore. It's not happening. Get things in by Thursday before the meeting, or are you just asking for another public hearing which is probably going to happen. We're probably going to continue this because too much stuff came in on Friday and today. And for everybody to try to review that, which we need to do. Now, I reviewed it all. And I understand it because that's what I do for a living, but I can't imagine trying to understand it at last minute. So the commission needs to be able to read this stuff and prepare questions, and they need time to do that. They work. This isn't their job. They're not paid for this. We do it because we love the town, and we've been doing it together for a long time. And, you know, we're experts ourselves. So, you know, we need to be fair to the commission, and we want to make the right decision. And in order to make that decision, we need the information. Now, having said that, I'm going to let the public go first tonight because some of the public faded out, and I don't blame them, you know, after hours of listening to expert testimony, and I want to hear from the public. But at the last meeting, Margaret sent in a letter and Suzanne sent in a letter, and I want to answer their questions. I don't want to go, I know most commissions are told you don't answer questions, you just listen. But their questions are fair and they should be answered, and I'm going to answer them. Suzanne, you asked, and I'm not going through your whole letter, I'm just summarizing it. You asked, why isn't the state involved? Well, the state's not involved because the state's authority is given in Connecticut to local wetland commissions. So they write the regulations, we adopt them, we could change certain things in them. Like every town could have a different buffer area. Ours is 100 from wetlands and 200 from the Chappaqua River. Some towns have 150 feet, some towns have 50 feet. Those things could be changed, other things can't. There are things in the regulations that we have no jurisdiction over, and they are solely the state's jurisdiction, like dams, mosquito control, other things, like all DOT and state projects. So yes, we're the ones who make the decision on wetland applications in our town in the state of Connecticut. Your second question had a lot to do about traffic, and we don't deal with traffic. It is not our jurisdiction.
No.
The DOT gives permits for the driveways, and Barbara has to give permits and numbers for the driveways. We have no jurisdiction over all that. We do have jurisdiction if the driveway crosses a wetland to get to a parcel, or if it's near a wetland. But as far as traffic and all that stuff, and Margaret, you wrote a letter all about traffic. We have nothing to do about that. And we have enough on our plate, so I'm not going to really get into that. Margaret, you wrote another letter, which I read in detail. It seems to be the same as the first letter you wrote, a lot of the same things. So do you want to go into that, Margaret? Would you like to comment on your letter?
Well, I actually wanted to just comment that I think my first letter, or actually I sent a separate message to the Wetlands Commission and or the selectmen or anyone who was in charge of road cuts onto state roads, that I was concerned about the sight lines. I suppose I think I did mention speeding, but I did in my letter say if we don't have the DOT assessment and we don't exactly know where the houses are going to be, and we don't have planning insight, that although this is the traditional sequence, I wonder if this is the smart sequence for this this application. I pointed out in my new letter that the prudent and feasible alternatives were extremely limited and did not apparently consider the most obvious one, which is just to have fewer lots. There's no reason why that could not be if the current driveways cause a problem, which is what you will decide. Yes, I also asked, please, and it is the same as similar to the first letter, but more expanded, if there are auxiliary if there's auxiliary work that's connected with the driveways, and we all had a look at the entrance to the North Street lot, could that be described and permitted in detail in any permit for the driveway? Because possibly, we were told, well, it's all permitted, but when we looked at the amount of regrading, topsoil regrading, excavation, tree removal, it appeared that would almost certainly ought to be looked at in terms of a hydrological flow into the adjacent wetlands. And I don't think that's usually considered. So I think it should be. And one reason, I apologize for sending the whole thing, but I sent you a recent Conservation District report on Monroe, which paid a lot of attention to groundwater hydrology as part of a wetlands report. And finally is the issue which I have raised before, and it's fairly new, but that's the issue of, could you at least give guidance on ice treatments in the winter? The Wetlands Commission response in one case in the past where I raised it was, these driveways will be flat, so maybe they won't need so much ice treatment. As you know, salt contamination is a problem statewide. This is a AA watershed. We know we're losing these waters, and these are not flat driveways. If they exist, they're going to be extremely steep. So I did ask that you take a look at that again, and maybe the Wetlands Commission could develop some general guidelines. I'm very concerned, as before, and we submitted previously a letter from Gary Robbins about the blasting and the effects on
Hey, Bill, I think you got to mute yourself because you're interrupting us here.
I just can't. I'm wrapping up. The blasting is always a question. We had a letter from Gary Robbins at UConn before, and it's if blasting is being considered, that it's not just a question of the wetlands hydrology. You do want to be sure you're not changing the bedrock wells, which often happens quite suddenly. So those are my comments. I think describe in detail what you're permitting. Look more seriously at the alternatives, and I would say look more seriously at some of the non-surface effects. And that's just look. I'm not. You decide, but I'm asking if you would just look more carefully. These driveways look pretty much impossible to me, but that's a layman's reaction.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. And let me assure you, everything you're saying is being taken into account. It'll all be answered as the process continues. I hear you about this blasting. I wasn't really up on the blasting during the permit. But on the west side, if you look at the sheets, there's, it isn't just the site plan. We show that, the site plan, but there's 14 sheets under it with very detailed information about how things are going to get constructed. And maybe you don't drill down to that level of detail, but we did. And there weren't a lot of trees cut down. There was no filling or grading on the west side. Everything was done right by the book. We know because we reviewed the engineering sheets and we met with the engineer before anything started. But that's neither here nor there. I hear what you're saying. We need to be careful. We need to evaluate all feasible and prudent alternatives, and we always do. So your thing on blasting, with that will come up tonight because there was a letter submitted on that.
Okay, I just want to add, there's a lot of water already discharged into the west side, mostly in the Wakely lot, but really a lot. And I don't know whose responsibility that is, but it pools up there. There's a discharge pipe that comes down the main road and across Wakely and into that corner, and then there's a lot coming from the east side into the same corner, and then there's another discharge pipe partway down. That's a lot of water already being directed onto the property. I don't know who's responsible, how to mitigate that, but we start with a lot of discharge. So I forgot to mention that.
Margaret, what it is this culvert bringing that stream water across the state highway. And it's the state's job to maintain it. You did say last
Yeah.
meeting is the town. The town has nothing to do with the state road. We have no jurisdiction. But it's the streams. There's two intermittent streams that drain the swamp up on top, and that's where they cross the road. And it's a lot of water, and I'm not going to get into a technical argument with you. That I'll leave that to the experts, okay? Because I don't want to side my opinion on that because I have an opinion, but that's not what I'm here for tonight.
Thank you.
All right. So Suzanne, did I answer your questions, or do you have more you want to listen more to what's going on, and then we could reconvene?
That would be fine. I think that my questions were not stated the way I stated them to you. I was just wondering if the state had been consulted based on the amount of water and changing of the waterways that will occur based on the topography of the property, based on the amount of blasting that it's going to take. So that number 1 and 2 question,
Suzanne, the state doesn't need to be consulted. We are the jurisdiction. End of story. Now, just so you know, deep doesn't really give us much support. There's one person at deep for 169 wetland commissions. There's probably less than that. I think there's 163.
Understandable.
So then her name is Darcy Withers. She's very helpful. Darcy is a long time been there. We're one person.
Yes.
So the state really doesn't get involved.
I can get into that.
Unless there's certain things that trip permits that they oversee. But this is all on us.
Sure. I guess what my big question is, and it will still continue to be, since this is a significant activity, who is going to be overseeing the preservation, both pre and post the blasting, the demolition, the resculpting, the removal of topsoil, et cetera, and so forth? Will it be federal, state, or local? Who will be in top of that? And I do have a bedrock well, and things that I've noticed just in the last 10 years. I've lived here for 25 years full time. I live at 197 North Street, full-time resident, owner of the property. We have noticed, my family has noticed the increase of water tankers bringing water to other local neighbors here. So, that has definitely changed in the short amount of time we've been here. And I can only see it, bedrock.
All right, Suzanne, so to answer your question, the feds aren't involved. That's the Army Corps of Engineers. They're not tripped in. It's us locally. And as you listen as this process goes on, if there was an approval, and I don't know right now because I don't have all the information to determine that. If there was an approval, part of the approval is always a bond where they got to put up money, and if they mess up, we have money to go to fix up what they mess up. And number 2 is we usually require an engineer, somebody with a license that could be taken away to oversee the activities. Our wetland enforcement officer, John Cody, oversees them, and we do keep a close eye on everything. I hear what you're saying about your well, but as the process goes on, you'll learn more, because that's going to start coming up. Okay?
Thank you.
Now, with the significant activity, I didn't want Marjorie to think that we overlooked her 2 letters that she submitted, and I want to make sure the commission has read them. One of them is a motion for denial. She wrote a letter giving us reasons why we should or could deny. And the second one is why they feel this is a significant activity. She laid out many different reasons why that is. A significant, whether an application is complete or not is totally up to the commission. Whether it's a significant activity or not is totally up to the commission. The commission made the decisions that it was complete and that it wasn't a significant activity. based on the information that was provided during the initial meeting. That was not the public hearing, but the meeting where the application was accepted, where we accepted it because we felt it was enough information to go forward, and then we did our site walk. One thing is, and right now I have a large permit into deep for a project I'm working on. Nobody, the way the permit process works is you submit the permit with all the information that's there, and commissions in deep always have other questions and always have more requests for more information. That's the way the process works. If we really took, if we expected an application to be totally, everything's complete, you got a crystal ball, you understand everything we need, nobody would get a permit. And that's the bottom line. It's up to the commission to determine whether the application is complete and whether it's a significant activity. At the first public hearing, we received more information. That's the way the process works. So I'm going to ask the commission, does anybody on the commission want to change their mind and agree that this maybe is a significant activity? Because we could change that, that opinion at any time based on the information that comes in. Does anybody on the commission feel that this is a significant activity based on your site walk and based on the information you've received? Rob?
Russ, I have one question though. What's the difference in the proceedings, just curiosity wise, if it was determined it was a significant activity?
Feasible and prudent alternatives.
Okay, but it triggers having a public hearing, and we are having a public hearing.
Right, but we're having a public hearing because we've determined it's not a significant, there's only two reasons why you could call a public hearing. Whether you deem it's a significant activity or whether you feel it's in the public's interest.
I think it's still in the public's interest. I do not think it's a significant activity.
Okay. Sue? Sue, you out there?
Russ.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm out there. Sorry. Had to find that unmute button. At this time, I'm still on the fence on that, and you said at a later time, would I be able to bring up my change my thoughts?
Sure. As you get more information, you absolutely could make a decision then.
Okay. Yeah. So right now I'm staying with how it is, but I'm open to, upon further information, whether I would be changing my mind on that.
Do you feel you've had enough information that the application is complete where it should go forward?
No.
Well, I mean, I don't need, at this point in time, as far as commenting, but what I want to say is you did bring up a point where this is not my area of expertise as far as my, full-time job. And so I was waiting to hear, because we didn't hear from everyone from the last public meeting. So I wanted to hear further information. But I'm almost too wondering if we would need to get another party in too, because I don't know if some of the data that's, that I read, I don't think I have full grasp of everything. Obviously, I don't have full grasp of everything that I'm reading on the data that's being presented. So
Right. So, and that's the expert's job, to make it understandable so you can make the right decision. If they're making it too complicated, then they're not doing their job. That's the bottom line. We don't need, I don't feel we need a third guy in here to confuse us. Like, really, I mean, we have excellent people. Their resumes are there. Let's go with that. Why I asked on the application whether it's complete, Sue, because if you don't feel the application is complete, then it shouldn't have gone forward at all. Whenever you feel an application is not complete, you shouldn't accept it at the first meeting. You can't go forward with a public hearing if you feel the application is not complete.
Well, so, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying.
All right. I just want to make it clear, because
right.
Now, obviously, like I said, You accept an application, you determine it to be complete, and never has this commission said it's incomplete because down the road we have questions. That's not the way the process should work, and that's not the way regulations should be handled. Even DEEP doesn't do it that way, and that's amazing in my mind. So I just want to make it clear that, again, you got to read Marjorie's letters. One of them gives you reasons why you should deny, which to me, you know, we were accused last meeting for reporting on our site walk exactly what we saw, that we were prejudicing ourselves, yet we were given a letter telling us why we should deny. So I guess that gets thrown right out. But the thing is, again, it's up to the experts to make it clear to a commission. And if you can't understand it one way or the other, you got to vote with what your feelings are. The state of Connecticut set commissions up exactly for this reason, Sue. They didn't set it up so we were all experts. They set it up because we're citizens in our town. And basically what you're doing, Sue, is you're sitting here like a juror and you're listening to both sides. And what side do you believe more? What side get better credible evidence? If they're getting too technical for you, then they're not doing their jobs. That's the bottom line. And I have a plan tonight to make it easier because I hear you. I mean, I understand this stuff, but the way it's being presented is tit for tat. And so we have a different way we're going to handle it tonight, trust me. And it'll be much clearer to you. So Andy, do you feel?
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, I'll just say one thing, Ross. It's not because what I was saying is that's what I was getting at, is I almost felt like, you know, they all have their credentials, but that it was one person says this and one person says that. And if you don't have that background, I mean, I can read that and try to summarize the best, but I almost feel like it's you know, one expert against the other expert, and it's getting confusing. But I also want to wait to hear, because we didn't hear all the information wasn't presented at the last meeting.
That's right.
And I have read the material that was been presented, but so I just want to hear it tonight.
And again, the state of Connecticut did not set this up so the commission's full of experts. Exactly the opposite. They didn't want it that way. They want a mix of the people in the community. Okay? So Andy, you out there, Andy?
I'm here. I feel the application was complete enough when we got it. I think that there's always back and forth between experts, and that's just the way it works. We have to sit and listen and make our decision. I'm comfortable proceeding with the way things are, and let's see what everybody has to say.
All right, so you don't feel at this point it's a significant activity?
At this point, no, but I will reserve judgment. Okay.
You know, our regulations do have a lot of leeway that says may and potentially, you know, under the definition of significant activity. And, you know, it's funny that the experts telling me what it means when we wrote them. And we did it purposely to allow us flexibility. So for them to say that it's a significant activity because it may have a potential is for us to have the leeway, not for them. It is our decision and our decision only. And it's okay for them to tell us what they think. That's what they should do. But you don't have to agree with an expert. You can't dismiss what they say. You have to listen to what they're saying, but you don't have to agree with them. You all are smart people. You've been on this commission a long time. You have to listen to both sides and make a choice, okay? To me, significant activity is significant. Is that exactly that? It's significant. And if there's not a crossing or filling a wetland or taking of a quarter acre of wetland, and all this is upland development, I don't know how I could call it significant. It doesn't meet the definition in my book. Now, I agree, our regulations say may and could have. Marjorie pointed out that our jurisdiction is not 100 feet, it's to the top of the watershed. In other words, our jurisdiction is as far as any potential impact goes. So they're right that we have jurisdiction over what's going on, even though there's not a crossing, there's not filling going on. So, and we do have jurisdiction on wetlands that are off-site. So good, I'm glad we got that cleared up. So now I'm gonna go to public. Anybody from the public who hasn't spoken, would you like to speak now?
Excuse me, Russ. Marjorie Shansky is raising her hand to speak.
Okay, I can't see it, Marjorie, I'm sorry, go ahead. Marjorie?
Yes, I've had it raised for about 35 minutes.
I didn't see it, I don't see it.
Yeah,
Julie's gotta let me know.
yeah.
And please pardon us, you know, this is a tough time.
It
We're not
was raised in the first instance because I'm not sure that I heard Miss Eddy refer to Mr. Trinkus's resume and Mr. Klein's statement of qualifications in Davison Environmental. I may have missed it, but you had inquired whether the complete list had been read, and I wasn't sure.
Is it on there, Karen? Karen, you,
I believe both of those items are on the list. They may have been titled slightly differently according to what the emails were
Yeah,
saying.
I'm not looking at anything. I'm just recalling.
yeah, I looked at the list that's on there, Marjorie.
I'm relatively sure everything is on.
Very well. And then I do have some comments directed at what the chair has just said, but I'll reserve them if you'd like to go back to the public.
I'd like to go back to the public. So does anybody from the public have any comments? Nobody? Okay. Marjorie, back to you.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, the statement that when you say that it's not a significant activity in your book, I'm guessing that the book that you're looking at is not the regulations, because the statement that whether or not it is a significant activity is totally up to the commission is only partially true. The regulations are the point of departure. And your regulations, as I've written about and will say only one more time, maybe tonight, any activity involving deposition or removal of material which will or may have a substantial impact. Any activity which may cause soil erosion. Half of our conversation has been about the inadequacy of the soil erosion and sediment.
What happened?
And stormwater controls. So I urge the commission to be governed not by the sentiment of the scope of your authority, but by your regulations. That's the point of departure. I would also
I disagree, Marjorie. We're following our regulations. We have a disagreement there.
Well, I understand.
You know, you're talking like you're experts are the only people we're listening to.
No.
We also read and saw Bill Kinney's where he says there won't be an impact. So it's not one side here, and you should let the process work through before you try to intimidate the commission.
You have to evaluate the facts against the regulations. You don't evaluate the regulations.
We're not lawyers. We're wetland commission chair.
Right.
We're wetland commissioners. We know our regulations. We wrote them. We're interpreting them as the people that the state of Connecticut expects us to be. And I wish Gail was here because I got a problem with the intimidation. I want the commission to do its job. And I want you to let us do our job.
So do we, Mr. Chairman. And I don't want them to give these interim sort of dispositions on where they sit, because that suggests that the decision has already been made.
No, nobody's making a decision, Marjorie. We need to learn more about the blasting. We need to hear two sides. You're not letting us do it. You're hung up on significant activity, which to me is just because if you appeal, you want to make that feasible and prudent alternative thing a harder thing to meet.
There's an erroneous point of departure. This is not about an appeal, though rights of that are manifest.
Absolutely.
about-
I mean, we're well aware of that.
This is about the fact that development is not a zero-sum game. This application process is not a zero-sum game. If there's somebody who wins this and somebody who loses it, the real loser is going to be the environment. This has got to be, as your statute charges, a reconciliation of development and conservation. And if it's not looked at that way with a mind on the environment the entire time, it's not us against them, it's all of us with reference to the environment. And that is where we would like the focus to remain.
The focus always is that for 25 years,
With all
this
due
commission.
respect, it's
No,
not-
because you're out of line, Marjorie. You're out of line. You're accusing the commission of not being fair and partial.
I'm not accusing
And if
the
we
commission of
should
anything.
stop this right now and start over again, I'm glad to do it. Now, I did ask our attorney to be here, and unfortunately, she might have forgot, because I feel intimidated. I want facts. That's all I'm asking for.
Come on.
Nobody's made any decisions here. Nobody. There's two sides to this story, and you're not letting us proceed.
I'm sorry, who's making those noises?
I thought it was you.
No.
Whoever it is, you don't have a right to have your mic on.
This is a consequential piece of property, Mr. Chairman. It may be the most consequential property that is undeveloped at this point. Section 20.5 of your regulations provides you, through the complex application process, which you've already said we don't need a third party, the opportunity to have a third party and to perhaps even mediate where the disparities between the body of experts are coming from.
We can make that decision as the process goes on.
And that goes, of course, to the point that whether an application is complete is both a macro and a micro question. It's complete if it goes down the checklist and has everything in it, but it may become incomplete if details are missing that become obvious that are necessary. So I'm trying to turn this into not a black and white exercise. This is an exercise of gradation. This is an exercise of educing the facts and then applying them to the static regulations.
Right. Wetland regulations are not black and white. They're gray. Nobody understands that better than us. Do you have anything else?
I have lots else. With respect to Ms. Minor's observation, certainly were you to get as far as an approval, you absolutely have the authority to condition an approval subject to the manner in which ice is treated. I would also raise again, though we haven't heard from the applicant yet this evening, that this open space, which is not a conservation easement, has those questions associated with what happens to it and in it over the long haul if it's not put into conservation easement. I'm concerned about inaccurate statements of fact and law that were in the engineer's letter and trying to diminish the scope of the agency's jurisdiction, which the chair has described as being fuller, and I appreciate that. The burden of establishing eligibility for this permit is at all times on the applicant. He says in his letter, the engineer, that we have the burden of saying it doesn't work. That's not true. They have the burden in the first instance. Now, we have taken their material, and Mr. Trinkus and Mr. Klein have written to it. You'll hear from Mr. Trinkus and probably Mr. Klein tonight as well. But the point is that the burden is theirs. The burden never leaves the applicant.
Understood that. Nobody's questioning that.
I'm just saying it's presented to you otherwise in the letter from the engineer. And his reference to how other property in nearby may have been developed earlier under a arguably less rigorous regulatory regime is of no consequence. It does not diminish or undermine their burden of establishing eligibility for this permit under the existing regulatory realm. There's no whataboutism. There's no alternative fact scenario, that, although that seems to be a series of things that we're coping with in bigger forums than this.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So I want to say one other thing, and I may have something later to say as well, but I want to say that the disregard of one's regulations can transform a decision into an exercise in arbitrariness. So that even, whatever your subjective experience is in listening to and evaluating the evidence, there must be also an objective relationship with the regulations as they're presented, the rule book to which we must all subscribe. So I think that at least gets me going or stops me going.
Okay.
But I appreciate being able to get that on the record.
Yep, I agree. Both sides need to be heard. I agree. And we will be objective. We always are. We're almost, what time is it? I can't read that.
7:53.
Okay, at 8 o'clock, we're going to pause because we have 2 applications. We just need to take care of regular business at 8 o'clock. So with that, Marjorie made some good points, and I think the experts have made some good points that I would like the commission's take on, because if we have an application, I want it final when we go to vote, not have 25 conditions on an approval or 25 reasons for denial, whatever it may be. I agree with Mr. Klein that there should be a conservation easement on the entire swamp up on top, including a 100-foot buffer. Does the commission agree with that recommendation by Mr. Klein?
Yes,
Rob?
Yes, I do.
yes, I do.
Sue?
I do as well.
Yeah, and we're not talking about what's there now. We're talking about a real conservation easement. Mr. Klein brought up a lot of good points that I want to hear more about. I'm interested in the blasting. I'm interested in Mr. Trinkus and his letter, which kind of opened my eyes to some things, and I hope yours too. So with that, I thought it's very hard to listen to an expert go on for an hour, and then the other expert rebuttals, and there's 80 different issues in that hour. So what I'm going to ask Mr. Trinkus to do is I want you to go through your last letter that you submitted, and I want you to talk about what you recommended or what your issues are, and then how how Dymar responded and what your response is to that. And then, and so in your letter, but I'd like it on the record. And then I'd like Dymar to respond to what you're saying, issue by issue. That way, you bring up number one, and we go through number one, and we understand number one, and then we go to number two. That's the way I want to do it. I don't want to do a hour long of you and then an hour long of him, and then and I'd like to do the same thing with the 2 environmental consultants. Mr. Klein wrote a good letter about Mr. Davidson. I'm getting you all confused, but about the Woods environmental consultant, and I'd like you 2 to go through it item by item. The reason for that is so we could understand it. It's really hard to understand. There's so much information that you're throwing at us that I think it'd be much better. It would be better to do it that way. So Steve, would you start out with number 1 on your letter that you submitted a couple days ago?
Hey, Russ.
Yeah.
Could we have the map up on the screen while we're going through this?
Mark, could you do that, or Julie, could you do that? Good idea, Rob.
I actually have C4 that I can put up if that's okay with Mr. Lancourt.
Sure.
Okay. Let me get that shared.
And Russ, it is 8 o'clock, close to 8. Do we want to?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. This will give Steve some time to prepare. Steve, are you out there?
Yes, I am. I'm on my phone.
Okay. Sorry, we can't see you.
Well, my camera's not
doing what it
You're
should
lucky.
do.
All right, Steve, why don't you prepare? Do you have any issue with that method, Steve?
With all due respect, Russ, I do. We tried this with the prior application with Mr. Szymanski, and it did not work. As the initial hearing at the end of July, Dymar had, I assume, an uninterrupted time as I was in conflict with another hearing. I would respect, I will not go through every point in my letter. I will hit the most important points. I will not be that long, but I believe I should have the opportunity without a point by point.
I don't have a problem. Steve, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I do want to have a rebuttal on each point so we can understand. But you need time to give your presentation. Absolutely, I hear you. Okay? All right. It's fair enough. Anybody on the commission have an issue? Does anybody on the commission agree with this idea I have? Because obviously I can't speak to you about it before. Is that a good way to go about it, or would you rather do the normal, let Steve go on for an hour and then Mark could respond?
Well, I'm confused, Russ, because I thought that Steve just said he didn't want to do it, that he wanted to.
No, Steve wants his time to give an overview of what his findings are. And then after that, we could go through point by point of the major items where there's a disagreement. And if at the end of the meeting, you guys, if the commission feels we need to bring Ed Pollack in again, then we'll do that. The state gave a 90-day extension, so there's plenty of time. I think that's on top of the 65 days that's in the regulations. I'm not sure. I think that's what Gail told me. If she was here, she could clarify. But we have time. There's no time, no reason to not make sure everybody's heard and that everybody on the commission understands what we're doing here. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break to move to our regular meeting. So we're gonna pause the public hearing, and we will start up at 8:10. So everybody in the public hearing could go do what they need to do, and we'll start the regular meeting. So we're pausing the public hearing, and with that, I will begin the regular meeting for August 25th. Is today the 25th? I lose count.
It is.
August 25th, 2020. This is the regular meeting of the Roxbury Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission. I'll call it to order. John, you want to start?
Sure. John Smoliga.
Sue Fitch.
Rob Horrigan.
Andy Engel.
Anybody else from the commission here?
Yes, we're new.
Oh, hi there.
Hi there.
I heard about you.
Thank you.
You're just watch.
We're new to the town and new to the commission, and we are we're a team. Lenora, to my left.
Hi, Lenora.
And Iran. And
hi.
Yes, hi.
Yes, we've been on a search, and I did ask Barbara to. We're putting our arms out there looking for people, and the first thing we do is ask them to just attend the meeting and watch. That way, you can make a decision. You may watch this and run. Trust me. But
we actually did some homework, and what I saw was interesting. So
yeah, it is interesting, and it's a great way to give back to a great town. Yeah. But it's not for everybody, and we don't want somebody coming on and then being bored and leaving a month or two later. Mm-hmm. So we ask everybody to come watch, and then if you're still interested after, you let Barbara know, and then hopefully we'll be live soon. Hopefully, my poor son is a freshman in college, is upstairs learning. It's kind of sad because when I was a freshman, I had a great time, but so it's a hard time right now. Of course, the second day of college, we had a keg party, so I'm glad he's not doing that. But that's the process, is you watch us. We do have an opening, and we can make that decision later.
Sounds good.
So we're going into a regular meeting right now, and this is what it normally is like. We meet
Okay.
once a month, Tuesdays at 7:30. Our
Mhm.
meetings normally take an hour and a half. Last year we didn't have like four meetings because there was nothing on our agenda.
Okay, good.
But the town is starting to wake up because of COVID. A lot of people are trying to move here. And we've gotten busy. Now, this is a public hearing on a 6-lot subdivision. So public hearings take a long time. They go on to 10, 11
I
o'clock.
have watched the video, and I know the property, so I haven't done the tour and survey that you guys do. But
Right.
I am familiar with that piece of land. At some point, I considered purchasing that house and the front of North Street over there, and ended up buying another property. But
Yeah.
it's an interesting project.
Yep. Okay, with that, we're going to move on with our regular meeting. So I'll look for approval of the minutes from the July 28th, 2020 meeting. Has the commission read the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Karen, could you help me? Because I'm not bringing up my minutes on my phone. Who's next?
Russ, there's two sets of minutes to approve. One is the public hearing, and then one is the regular meeting.
All right. I'll look
Was
for
that
a
the
motion.
public hearing we just did, I think, right?
Right. I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes of the public hearing of July 28th, 2020.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any
Russ, I'll
discussion?
abstain.
John will abstain. Any discussion? With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Next, Karen? I think
Next
we're on.
is the regular meeting of July.
Right. So the first item on the agenda is the woods, and we're going to table that because we're still in the public hearing process. The second item on the agenda is Jackson. If you remember at the last meeting, the commission asked me to contact Mr. Jackson and tell him you wanted an engineer to approve the infiltration units that were proposed for the new house. I guess the address on the letter was wrong, Karen, but
It should say 177 East Flag Swamp is the property where the activity is going to take place.
okay. Charlie, are you on?
I am, yes.
Hi, Charlie. How are you?
Good, Russ.
Good. Tell Mary I said hello and the
I
rest.
will.
Yeah. I read the letter. I confirmed with Brian. He did have the wrong address. Does anybody have an issue?
Not at all.
I'm good.
That was the one issue you had. So it's
I'm good.
non-regulated, but you didn't want to approve something underground without an engineer approving it. So with that, I'll look for a motion.
Move we approve this as a non-regulated activity.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's non-regulated, Charlie, so you save $100 or whatever it is.
All right. This makes my night, Russ.
All right, have a good night.
All right. Thank you.
We'll move on to new business. What's on new business? It's Dennis, right? Dennis McDonald?
Dennis McDonald, yes.
What's the address?
6 Baker Road for a garage.
Okay, it's a garage?
Yes.
Okay. So Dennis, are you on?
I am.
Hi,
Hello,
Dennis.
everyone. Hey, Russ.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. Yourself?
Are you in Florida or are you here?
Yes, I am. I'm not allowed to come to Connecticut.
Okay, so Dennis, this is the property where you just built a garage, right?
This is the property where I built the red accessory building, correct?
Okay. All right, so now you want to build a garage, is that it?
There is, I want to, as the plan shows, I want to put an attached garage, onto the side of the existing house towards the red accessory building in the area that is presently not garage, but a driveway, excuse me.
Right, and it's 15 feet from that wetland back there?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So Dennis, at the first meeting, we accept an application. I've reviewed it. Has everybody reviewed the application?
I have not.
No, I haven't either.
I haven't either. I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it.
Karen, did that go out to us, or is there a reason why?
It was, yes, it was posted on the website.
Oh, okay. The commission didn't understand we needed to go on the website. All right, Dennis, so what we do is if the application is complete, which we can't make that determination because none of us have looked at it, we set up a site walk. That's required. We can't just approve something or, so the site walk, we'll just to be fair to you, for the next, we'll accept the application. If it's incomplete, we'll contact you for information and you'll have to reapply. If it is complete, we'll set up a site walk. Do you want to be at the site walk? It's just one or two of us.
Brian can certainly meet you. That would be fine.
All right, so Brian's doing the engineering on this?
No. Brian, my son.
Oh, your son. Yes, I've met him. Nice kid.
Brian McDonald.
Okay.
Right.
So if you can email me or Karen, his email is contact. I will contact him so I could set up a site walk. Who from the commission would like to do the site walk?
I would like to join it.
Well, you're not on the commission yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll join tomorrow.
Yeah, you have to go through the process.
Okay.
Well, who's on the commission today who wants to do the site walk?
I can go, Russ. I'm working half a mile down the street, so.
Okay.
I can join you, Andy.
Sounds good, Rob.
So Karen, would you get their information of Brian so Rob and Andy could contact him and meet him and look at what he wants to do?
Of course.
All right. And Rob and Andy, I'll look at the application. Could we all take a look at this application this week to make sure it's complete,
Sure.
that it has everything we need, because we need to contact Dennis if it's not complete and tell him what he needs to do to complete it and then refile next month. And if that's the case, you can't do the site walk.
We'll take a look at the application first and then go from there.
All right, Dennis, what may be helpful for you for time-wise is you may want to have an environmental consultant look at the wetlands because you are close. You're 15 feet. And it'd be nice to have a write-up by a wetland scientist as to what the wetlands are, what their functions are, and how this may or may not impact the wetlands.
All right.
Okay? I mean, we may come back the next meeting and then ask for that. But so you don't have to do it, but we may find that it's needed at the next meeting. So I'm just telling you ahead of time just to try to save you some time.
Sure. Understand. I appreciate that.
Okay, great. Then we'll be in touch.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, is it 8:10? Does anybody?
It is 8:10.
Yeah. Does anybody on the commission need to take a break? I'm good. I mean,
Isn't there another application on the agenda? I thought Bill Horrigan had something in front of us.
no. Bill Horrigan's was ruled as non-regulated.
All right.
John Cody. John
Secure
Cody
that.
was able to approve that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Everybody cool?
I'm good.
All right. Is everybody back? Mr. Trinkus, Marjorie, you all there?
Russ, do we need to adjourn the regular meeting?
Yeah.
Do we want to do that? Because
No, we don't. We want to, I think, recess it in case you want to go back to the regular meeting afterwards.
Okay.
That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Okay. Up to you, though.
So I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So Sue, what is the name you got on there? Boo Band Keggers?
What? Oh, that's what's up there? Oh, no.
I should warn you.
No, it's Bob and Kegger, so it's the alpaca.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, just to let you know.
Thank you. Well, if you want to follow Bob the Alpaca, that's the Instagram page. So
Oh, okay, great.
I'm more interested in the keggers, Sue.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
why I
those
was
are the
asking.
goats. Those are the goats. Oh,
All right,
boy.
we will now continue. We'll hit the go button on the public hearing and we will now continue. Steve, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Russ. For the record, my name is Steve Trinkus. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Connecticut and also Maryland. I reside at 114 Hunters Ridge Road in Southbury. And on behalf of Paul Manson, I've reviewed the application. I had an initial letter, and then after the applicant's submittal just prior to the July hearing, I reviewed that information, and the revised letter is dated August 21st, 2020.
And the initial letter, Steve, what's that dated? Just so we.
It was July 20th. The initial letter. So
2020.
Okay. There's a lot of questions about, missing information or information shown, but I want to really stick to the high points.
Thank you.
On the plans, you can all see that there's substantial grading of the side slopes along these driveways because there's substantial cuts. And the applicant submitted a detail showing subsurface drains that could be put on that slope, except that detail is for what's called a slope repair. It's not a new construction, which has to have a reverse bench every 15 feet vertically, where the slope actually goes back into the hillside. You have a drain to collect the water from above, and then you have a drainage plan to bring it out to the bottom of the hill. So the detail.
Steve, hold on one second. What lot are you talking about?
This is any of the driveways that have a regraded slope greater than 15 feet in height. I think it's almost applicable to the first three driveways. I believe the two at the northern end do not have large cuts and fills that meet that requirement.
That's right. That's right. That's why I was getting confused.
Could we get the site plan back up?
The site plan would be really helpful right now.
Let me get that up there.
So we're going back live. I'll wear a mask, I promise. It does take a while to come up. There you go.
Yeah, so, it's a long,
so,
well, wait a minute,
Steve, it's easier for the commission if you went and showed us where these things are.
Yeah, I will once the image is trying to come up here.
Stable, yeah.
Okay. It is on lot number 1.
Is that the orange area?
Actually, it's below that. It's really right when you come in off North Street, and the regraded slope on the right-hand side of the driveway.
And that is where they need to do blasting too?
Well, that's another point. I believe they will, because it's a substantial cut, but the regraded slope is greater than 15 foot vertically, and under the 2002 erosion guidelines from DEP, you have to put what's called a reverse bench in, which is when you have a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 slope going up at a 15-foot elevation above your finished grade, you actually have a bench that slopes back into the hillside. There's a drain, and then the slope continues up. So it winds up actually regrading more of the slope because you're stepping back 5 feet and then continuing up. But the purpose of it is to intercept water on the slope instead of letting it run down and saturate it. One of the problems that has occurred along I-84 a few years ago before DOT fixed it was, regraded slopes. And primarily, there was a situation just uphill of exit 9 coming eastbound, where the slope got saturated and large chunks of it slid down to the edge of the road. So the idea of the reverse benches is you're intercepting surface and shallow groundwater and preventing the slope from being saturated. So it affects lot number 1. It affects the similar spot on lot number 2, You can see the regrading on the right-hand side coming up. And I believe there's a couple spots on the driveway to lot number 4, based on this small scale. The applicant also submitted a document, total maximum daily load analysis for Eaglesville Brook, which goes through the middle of Yukon, which has absolutely no bearing on this project. The intent of the TMDL, or total maximum daily load, is that anytime Yukon goes to expand a building, a parking lot, a driveway on campus, they have to use low impact development to effectively infiltrate that water and make the impervious cover disappear. They cannot exceed the amount of impervious cover in that watershed plan. So that's not really applicable here. And we'll talk about impervious cover a little bit later on. The applicant submitted 2 alternative grading plans for, I believe it's lot 1 and 2, that shows a ledge cut that is substantially less grading. However, we have no soil testing. I would not disagree that there is rock there, but we don't know the extent of it. So you've got a regrading plan. That's what the applicant has submitted. That's what the commission must evaluate. If they wish to do soil testing and prove where the ledge is and design ledge cuts, that's fine also. But right now you have a earth slope being shown there, and that's what you need to evaluate. Several of the driveways, I know I think lot 1, 2, I believe 3 and 4, there's an initial landing of about 4 to 5% coming in off the intersection with North Street. And then it transitions up to a much steeper grade, anywhere between 13 and almost 15%. And when you transition between grades, you need to have a vertical curve to make a smooth transition. The applicant is using a 20-foot vertical curve. And while he has submitted in large detail showing that a fire truck would not bottom out there, that is just, it's too short to make a smooth transition. You're going from, a 5% grade up to 15. Sound engineering practice would make that curve at least 50 foot in length, which would substantially increase the amount of grading because it pushes the cut much deeper into the hillside. Excuse me. They also submitted an impervious surface cover report from 1996 out of Yukon. And this basically says, on a watershed basis, if you're less than 10% impervious cover, you should not have an adverse impact on water quality. However, the document is 24 years old. And in the field of low impact development, which is a focus on water quality and runoff volumes, there's been a lot more research done since 1996. And basically getting down to even 4 to 5% impervious cover in a watershed can lead to adverse impacts, especially if it's directly connected, such as these driveways, which everything is running downhill. But the applicant seems to take the position that, well, this site, we've got roughly 2.5%, I believe, impervious cover. So therefore, we're way under 10%, so we don't need to address water quality. And I take great exception to that, because basically what you're saying is, well, it's death by 1,000 cuts. So, okay, I'm at 2.5%, the next guy's at 2.5%, so is the guy up the hill, and now all of a sudden in the watershed, you're at 12%. Everybody was only 2.5 individually, but cumulatively, now you have a problem.
Thank you for explaining that, Steve, because that's one thing I couldn't understand last meeting.
So in my professional opinion,
what you're saying, Steve, is they're saying that they're less than 2.5% for each lot, but if you add them all up, you're over the 10%.
well, I believe Mark's position, and he can respond later on, is that on the site project, the proposed 6 lots here, that based on the land area and their proposed impervious cover, they're roughly 2.5%.
In the whole development.
Oh, in the whole development.
Okay.
I believe that's what they submitted at the end of the day today.
That's correct.
Showing that. However,
explain to me what's wrong with that.
Okay. Well, like I just said, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. You need to address water quality of all your impervious cover. That is the intent of the 2004 Connecticut DEP Stormwater Quality Manual. Irregardless of how much impervious cover you have, if you're creating new impervious cover, especially driveways and or roadways, they're the dirtiest part of it. Roof runoff is relatively clean except for atmospheric deposition of nutrients, but that can easily be attenuated. Roads and driveways, not so much so. So you have to address water quality, and that has not been done on this application. Getting into, I think the other major thing is the use of this, the rational method. Actually, let me back up. Under one of the documents that the applicant submitted, the water quality volume and water quality flow calculations, it's noted that for drainage areas A3, C3, D1, D2, and G1, the basins are extended detention basins. Well, in the 2004 manual, there are specific design criteria that extended detention basins and or constructed wetlands, a dry pond, any of the treatment practices, there's components that must be in those basins for water quality improvement. You don't get to pick as an a la carte menu of doing one and not the other. If you don't put the components in there, you don't get the water quality benefit. So none of the basins shown in these drainage areas are anywhere close to complying with that. First off, none of them have a forebay to trap sediments. The forebays also have to have minimum length to width ratio of 2 to 1, ideally 3 to 1. If with an extended detention basin, you have a minimum pond volume, which is equal to or exceeding the water quality volume. And again, this is a fixed volume. So this is the volume of water below your outlet structure. So it's a permanent pool of water. It also specifies being 6 to 8 foot in depth. We're not that deep. They also have minimum drainage areas, and the minimum drainage area for an extended detention basin is 10 acres. I have not looked at specifically at the drainage areas, but I do not believe that any of them meet that requirement. You also have to have an aquatic shelf. None of the basins have it. So these stormwater basins are not in compliance with the specifications found in the 2004 manual. Now, DEP, in their infinite wisdom, when they created the manual in the early 2000s, put an opening paragraph in there that states more or less it's designed to supplement rather than supplant professional judgment. However, in designing for water quality treatment, whatever practice you're going to use, you must include the required components of that design, because that's how you get water quality benefit, and we do not have those incorporated into this design. I think the other major issue I have is regarding the use of the rational method of runoff, and this is on page 6 of my August 21st letter. The rational method, back when I learned it in the late 70s and hasn't really changed except it's been computerized in the time since, is solely designed for calculating the peak rate of runoff. So if you were designing a road and you had catch basins every 300 feet, sizing, doing the peak calculation for the drainage area to each catch basin, that's an appropriate use of rational. If you had a singular driveway crossing, which I believe Mark had on the western side of the site, you know, if the watershed was relatively small, it's also an appropriate use. It gives you a peak rate only. It does not give you a accurate volume. What it makes the assumptions, whether it's a rational method or what's called the modified rational method, software companies have now taken the rational method and kind of gone a little bit beyond its original intent. It assumes that the time of concentration from when the rain starts to the peak, that the falling lake is equal to that or maybe is twice that. So if you had a time of concentration, say of 15 minutes, the going down from the peak back to zero runoff would either be another 15 minutes or possibly could be another 30 minutes. Rainfall events last much longer than that. That is why we use TR55 or TR20. which is known as urban hydrology, to develop a rainfall hydrograph, because rainfall events are 24-hour events. It goes midnight to midnight. And the rainfall is not uniformly distributed in a natural storm. The models assume it is, but the models also do not start runoff when it rains initially. And that's one of the problems with the rational method, is it starts giving you runoff right at the beginning of a rainstorm. That does not happen. When it initially rains, especially today with the leaves on the trees and all that, the trees intercept a lot of rainfall and the vegetation will absorb it to use in photosynthesis. So a lot of rainfall does not even hit the ground. And this is known as initial abstract because the rainfall just doesn't get to the ground. Also, the initial rainfall that does reach the ground generally infiltrates because it has been bounced off twigs or leaves. So the velocity is dropped. So when it hits the forest litter or a meadow area, as an example, it basically can't run off, it'll infiltrate. It's been slowed down. So rainfall runoff starts at some period after the rainfall event. And obviously the more pavement you have, the sooner that condition would occur. But in a natural environment, it starts generally a few hours after the rainfall event goes on. The applicant has claimed
What's the point though, Steve? Again, you're getting in the heavy
well,
detail.
I will get to the point quickly on this one, Russ. The point is that the applicant is claiming these detention basins at the bottom of the hill are providing zero increase for the 100-year runoff. They are not. They are woefully undersized because of using the rational method. And I outline on page 6 all of the reasons why the rational method simply is not appropriate for the modeling of basins. I do not disagree with Mark. It's for sizing drainage systems on a driveway or road. It could be more appropriate. TR55 tends to give you higher runoff rates, but seeing as we're getting a lot more short duration, high intensity storms, being a little bit more conservative is not necessarily a bad thing. But it's also the only appropriate methodology for routing the detention basins. There are issues with the erosion control plan. I'm not going to go into all of them. They're in my letter for the record. It basically is my professional opinion. There is a lot of missing information of details. There are some generic details, but you have many underground systems, and we have one generic detail for these. We don't have details of each of the outlet structures for these basins. Another aspect, and this was raised on the prior application, is you're going to have water quality issues. You have paved driveways that are all running right back to North Street, and we do not have adequate water quality treatment. So you are going to have sediment loads. You're going to have chlorides, as Margaret mentioned. You will have metals and hydrocarbons from your vehicles up, and UPS trucks driving up and down the driveways, and there's no treatment system. So that water will be discharged to either the little grass ditch along the east side of North Street, and then it goes under, I believe, a couple cross culverts to the west side, and ultimately is discharging into the wetlands across the street. And you're going to be you're introducing increased pollutant loads. You will be changing the water chemistry of the water in the wetlands, and that is an adverse physical impact to the wetlands. And that
have you done a nutrient load calculation?
I could. I have a program to do that.
Steve, you're saying that, and you're just saying it's a potential then?
I'm not, no, it's based on my expertise in low impact development. I actually have a model I developed to calculate this, and any project like this will have increased pollutant loads over the natural environment that you have here. And if you're not adequately treating them, they will be discharged. It's as simple as that.
So let me ask you, Steve, because this kind of bothers me. You have 6 lots on 64 acres, okay, right? A lot of land. It's a lot of land. Isn't that enough land to uptake those nutrients and other things by treatment on its own? I ask because, I'm sitting with a client on a 28 homes on 15 acres in Windsor, and and it's flying through, and I'm wondering how that happens when 6 houses But
Well,
64 acres in Roxbury is like, it sounds like it's a road we're building here.
Well, I will tell you, not to defend Windsor, many towns in the state of Connecticut do not even consider water quality in their subdivision or zoning regulations, and they need
Okay.
to under their MS4 permits.
All
But
right, thank you for
now,
explaining that. 'Cause
on several of the lots Mark has rain gardens. I'm not sure which ones. I think a couple of, maybe the two northernmost lots, 5 and 6 do, and I think a couple of the other ones do. I just don't recall which ones. And he's directing, I believe, roof drains in some cases to the rain gardens. That is an appropriate way to attenuate nutrients that fall on the roof from atmospheric deposition or from fertilizers on your lawn.
Well, we don't allow that, Steve.
Fertilizer?
Roof drains have to go into infiltration systems.
Well, a rain garden is much more effective because it is an infiltrative practice. It's a surface infiltrative practice with a media that actually filters pollutants, underground Cultec type systems.
So you're agreeing with how he's treating it?
In general, on several of the lots. The issue is all these driveways are pitching right back to North Street, and there is no treatment of that runoff from these paved driveways. The drainage system along the driveways consists of either a singular or on both sides of the driveway a stone curtain drain, for lack of a better term. I raise concerns if you're on a 13 to 14% grade that the water whipping down the pavement, which it's going to do, even if it's pitching out to the drain, it would tend to not drop into the drain, but would run across the surface. And in the DIMAR response to my initial comments, they basically said, yeah, some of it could happen. So now you've got water running down the driveway that's not going to get into this drain. Another issue that comes up, since this drain is filled with crushed stone, is how does it work in the winter when everything is frozen? And you're plowing your driveway, but you generally don't plow the shoulder area. So as we all know, snow builds up along the edge of a road or your driveway, and you basically get a little ice layer. Now the water from the driveway cannot get to this drain, so it has no choice but to run all the way to the bottom of the hill.
Okay.
So those are the issues that the driveways are the main culprits from a pollutant loading standpoint. The houses, not so much, but the driveways, there's not adequate treatment because the basins are not designed to address water quality.
Okay, so that was my question. You know, after the first public hearing, I felt that there wasn't any specifics. It's just generalized. There will be an impact. It's significant, but no real pointing to how that's going to happen. You kind of explained it. What you're saying is, because I wanted my client, and I will ask my client later, I want him to be specific and show me where sedimentation and other things that he claims are going to occur, where exactly is that going to occur? But so what you're saying is all the stormwater is going down to North Street. It's going to be laden with the typical stormwater pollutants.
Correct.
And it's going to go across into the wetland on the west side, and that's going to have an impact.
Yes.
What kind of impact will that have?
Well, it changes the water chemistry. A lot of your benthic organisms that live in the gravel substrate of streams that are at the bottom of the aquatic food chain have can be adversely affected and die off from actually very low concentrations of metals and or hydrocarbons. And metals from our cars come from two places. They come from our brake dust. You know, whenever you wash your car, your rims are always black. Well, that's, metals, mostly zinc in there. Also wear and tear of steel belted tires on pavement, and the occasional little oil leak. We're not talking, dropping 5 quarts of oil on your driveway, but the periodic little oil leak on pavement that then washes off with the rain. But a lot of the benthic organisms have, a very low threshold for surviving, even small concentrations of that in a pristine wetland, which is what you have on this site and you have across the street.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anything else you need? Steve?
No, those are the high points. You had
Okay.
all my other
Yeah, the
information.
details are in the letter.
Yeah.
Yes,
And while you had 8 meetings today, this is my 4th, so I you know.
Well, I didn't have 8 wetland meetings. I had 8 conferences.
Yeah, well,
Much easier. Much easier. Still a lot of time looking at a screen at people's faces. Okay, Mark. You want to? I would have preferred we did that step by step, but maybe you wrote it down. But if not, I did. Maybe you could go through it one by one. One I'm interested in, Mark, is please explain to me this impervious area. While you're saying it's 2.5%, anything under 10% is good. You did show us at the last public hearing something Steve Trinkus actually wrote, which said that, but he rebutted that by saying that, well, that was a Yukon thing and doesn't really apply here. So maybe you could explain it better to us as to impervious area and why you don't believe that there will be an impact.
Well, thank you, Russ. For the public record, my name is Mark Lancor. I'm a principal engineer with Dymar. Been a professional engineer in public practice for over 40 years. I am registered here in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Florida, Massachusetts, and New York. So a couple of things with regards to comments by Mr. Trinkus is with regards to, first, I want to get a couple things out of the way, Russ, just to clear the record in terms of some maybe misinterpretation of some things that we have submitted. First, with regards to the slope and the reverse benches, the reason why the drawings are shown at the 2-to-1 slope is because that's basically in your regulations. And as far as information that we have submitted that purports to show where rock cuts would be, that's based on a thorough inspection of the site. It's pretty obvious when you go into the site. I think it's inappropriate to say that an applicant has to go and dig everywhere on the site to determine where ledge is. I've been around long enough in this industry to understand that I can read a site, I can map a site, and be able to, with conviction, that the areas that we are showing where rock cuts would be are going to be where rock cuts are going to be. And I think, I know if the commission, through their site walk, would agree, because I pointed out these areas and it's pretty obvious where they are. So to that regard, if the commission needs, we would be happy to submit a regrading plan that shows where we know where those rock cuts are. And if there's any place that I'm uncertain, I would go and do a test pit, but we're not advocating to have cuts in area that we don't know what's going on. And to that point, I will later on introduce Ray Gennaro, who is a geotechnical engineer, speak specifically about some of the questions I know that you and other people have regarding rock removal and what the geophysical conditions are here on the site. So when you start looking at the individual lots, specifically to lots number 1 and 2, which is where the slopes by earth would exceed areas that are greater than 15 feet, those areas are actually occupied by rock. And that there will be no place on those lots 1 and 2 that would exceed 15 feet in height with those rock cuts. And again, I would be happy to resubmit those grading plans to demonstrate, to show that. So I appreciate Steve's input regarding reverse benches. We understand how those work. We know how they work. If it's necessary, we would put them in, but we don't believe it's going to be necessary at all for any of these lots. Regarding the area of concerning 10% rule, in terms of the studies that have been done. At some point here, I am also going to introduce William Kenny, because William Kenny also has things to say with regards to that particular study. And that study that was done by UConn has been purported as if it's just a planning study. It's been a study that's been widely used throughout the state by many consultants, including Steve Krinkus and Michael Klein, in projects that they've done, which is representing a developer. So I want to make it clear that that from it depends on what side of the fence that you're on. It depends on how you're going to use it. It has applicability. It is evident by all the work that UConn did for this particular municipality, which involved a number of subwatersheds in a community that was basically a suburban rural community that had various land uses that they did the study on. That work was done for a lot of reasons. It was not just for a planning tool, but was for guidance to give commissions like yourself information that would help in terms of how you judge a project. It's like anything. We're at 2.5%. And I think I heard Steve say, well, even if you get down to 4 or 5%, you're starting to get to that threshold, but it's better. Well, what is best? I mean, 2.5% on 64 acres is something that...
Mark, they're saying you're not applying it right, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, we're applying it right.
Yeah, the reason why I am is this is why the commission gets confused, because we heard what you said, then we heard Steve say it's not being applied right. In fact, it was said many times at the last public hearing, and I still don't understand what they mean by that. If it's 2.5%, it is what it is. But I guess they're claiming you're not, I don't know what they're claiming. I like that.
It's a tool, Mr. Chairman. It is a tool that is used for how you can approach and look at projects in terms of what their effective impacts would be. The applicant is actually saying that we're going to change the whole water chemistry of this whole wetland system. That's not true. I mean, it's when you, and I'm going to bring Bill Kenny in at a point, because we've got some illustrations that are really going to help the applicant understand, well, what does this 2.5% really mean relative to the total 64 acres that we're dealing with? And it's important to understand that, yes, it's a planning tool. It's a guidance. It helps people like myself as professionals understand how you apply and do good land use planning. But the 2.5% that we're going towards is much less than even the threshold that the Connecticut, UConn had even reported through DEP. They even went as high as 12%. And then they took a liberty of that. When you have a impervious area in a watershed that's below, in their mind, 11%, you're in an area where that the impacts, pollutant impacts, sediment load impacts, all the other kinds of impacts are, yes, they do occur, but they're not huge in numbers, because
So you're saying that you take this, you figure out the number,
right,
and then you design based on that.
What I'm saying is that if the relative difference is, you could have a project that has 39 or 40% impervious cover. You have to look at that project much differently in terms of its effect on the watershed than it's something that's got 2.5%. You can't, that's not comparing the same two projects. So the distinction is somebody that comes in and completely covers the entire property with impervious area, and you're supposed to treat that the same as if I'm somebody that's at 2.5% and I've got a tremendous amount of forested buffer. That's the one thing that is being missed in terms of even our drainage, of how it all works. One thing that is very important, and if you look at the Connecticut stormwater drainage manuals, in terms of water quality. One of the primary focuses that they look at is called disconnection. And disconnection, why do you speak about disconnection? Disconnection is something is when you try to put your drainage areas to try to mimic as close as you can in terms of drainage patterns that currently occur, and you disconnect so there's not a whole lot of connection between the drainage watersheds themselves. And that's exactly what we have here. We have 25 subwatersheds completely disconnecting from one lot to another and even internally to the lot. So you have to take a look at the whole picture and not just assume that everything is running down these driveways and ending up down at the head foothills of Route 199. That's just not the case here. So
then why are they claiming that's the case?
Because if you actually read Steve's original report, and I'm going to have to say, I never received his rebuttal letter of 821. Never received it. I've not seen it, not been sent to me. So,
Karen, when did that come in? Monday? Yesterday? Karen, you out there? I don't blame her. She went to bed.
It's okay. I'll get the letter. It's just that I haven't had the.
That's okay, Karen. Do you know when that letter came in?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I don't have the emails with me, but pretty much everything has come in very, very recently. So.
Yeah, that's the
We were
problem.
trying to send everything out as quickly as we could, but you know, it's all been in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, then anything that came in after Thursday is off the books, really.
And I understand.
We discussed it during the meeting, but you will get a chance to read that letter, and we'll go on the next public hearing.
We'll be able to comment on it.
Everything will get posted if it isn't, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
and I'm hoping that comment comes in sooner rather than later. So they don't then say they need more time to comment on your comments. You know?
Right. And I agree with that, Mr. Chairman. I agree with that. You know, and with regards to you know, the stormwater, I have to, as much as I've been around a long time, and I've worked on TR 55, TR 20. I worked on the modified route. I've worked on all these methods.
What does TR mean? Just for all us.
It's technical release 55. It's done by you know, it's an SCS model that eventually turned into TR 20, which was
right. It's a stormwater model
that manages peak rates and volumes. And one thing that you got to understand, and you know, these are not. These models, they say 24-hour period. That was just a period that was selected. And it's not, it's an arbitrary number. Rainfall, we all know rainfall events occur sometimes in 6 hours or 8 hours or 24 hours or 2 days or whatever it is, because it was just the way the model was set up, 24-hour period. So it's not, so when somebody purports that rainfall events are over a 24-hour period, that's exactly not true, because they occur all sorts of different. And TR 20 is actually a modification to what we used to call the unit hydrograph method. So all of that stuff is, I don't want to get into the deep woods on this, but TR 20 and TR 55 were also set up for very large watersheds. The watershed that we're dealing with here is 30 acres. That's what I'm dealing with, 30 acres. And I can tell that if any commission member is driven around in some sites and see these big, deep holes, these pits for basins, water quality or detention basins or extended detention basins or retention basins, how many times have you driven by and not seen any water in those basins after a storm event or even during a big storm event? Because the model is so conservative. And it was dealt with for larger watersheds. So when we apply the unit hydrograph method, rational method, there's a reason for it. Because it does the job on very small watersheds. Connecticut DOT adopts it. Anything under, and it's been well documented, anything under 200 acres, you can apply it. We don't. As a rule of thumb in our office, we apply it to anything under 100 acres because one thing that you don't want to end up doing is end up having these such oversized basins that absolutely are not needed on the landscape. And that comes from professional judgment with expertise in doing this over 40 years. So you can lead to all the publications, you should do it this way, you should do it that way. It is professional judgment in terms of what is appropriate for the particular watershed. So in this case here, we chose this method. If I have to go back and go redo it, if that's what the commission wants, we'll do it. But you're going to end up with some different outcomes that are really not necessary for this particular site. We have very big buffers. We have a great wooded buffer. We're taking advantage of that wooded buffer in terms of pollutant removals, in terms of when you're going to hear coming out of Mr. Klein. You know, thermal. They talk about thermal pollution with no information about how that actually occurs. Well, if they look at the plan and we look at it from the fact that the plan have a drainage system that's disconnected and uses the buffer as a source for thermal reduction. There's plenty of literature out there that will tell you that's a great way of dealing with it, where we're not connecting it and discharging directly to a wetland. There's no place on this site that we're directly discharging to a wetland at all. So that thermal pollution aspect is something that has no merit at this point. And
What
there's
do they
nothing that
mean-
has been, what?
I'm sorry, Mark.
No.
What do they mean by your erosion control plan is inadequate? I mean, I can't get the details.
I'm still perplexed by all of it, and I'm going to leave some of it to Bill Kenny to talk about it. One thing about soil and erosion control plans, they're not static. They move with a project. You got to remember, this is a project that we're suggesting is a feasibility plan as well. You know, we're looking to get a subdivision approved for 6 lots. As we brought it back to the commission, we've also understand that if anybody moves forward on a lot, they're going to come back with the commission on specific plans, okay, that are going to address all the components that need to be addressed in order to get an approval for that particular lot. But the E&S plans that we presented are well detailed. They have all the parts that are in the E&S control manual, to the extent that we've even limited the amount of open disturbance that can happen at any one time, which is very important, especially for long driveways, especially for driveways that have, you know, have a significant amount of earthwork involved, whether it's cuts and fills or any of the other attributes that you have to go and develop the site. And we're specific about that on our narrative. And to that extent, I don't understand where all of a sudden we're inadequate, because there's been nothing pointed out that we're inadequate. Where we're not.
Well, they're saying that you don't follow 2002 guidelines. That the basin.
That's absolutely not true. Mr. Chairman, I got to tell you, that is absolutely not true.
That the basin you're proposing at the bottom is undersized. You heard Steve just say this.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing
doesn't have the wedges on it's supposed to have. And I just don't know how two people could be so far apart.
But because one, Steve is applying as if we're providing a bioretention system on every location on the site. That is not the truth. That is not. We have never said that. It's not identified on the site that way. We have various control areas where we provided control structures, which will do some impoundment because they work with the way that flood routing goes. But the only area that we have, and it's an area that is down at the lower end of the site, at the bottom of lot number 2 3, and 4, that driveway. It's the old house site. Now we're using that old house site to the maximum extent possible to create a basin that is going to provide water quality benefits.
So you're going to take the basement, take the concrete out and make it into a basement?
That, and we're going to expand that area, but we're not looking, and I say this, and I agree with Steve. There are, you know, when you look at full water quality and all the bells and whistles and everything else that you want to see in a full-fledged basin, this basin does not have the capacity to actually apply to the TR20 method or any other water quality method, but it provides a serious benefit because any water that comes down that I can trap and I can allow for pollutant removal through the system. And keep in mind, the system is a treatment train. It's not like all the basins and all the driveways are connected all at once. We have a series of areas that come off of the driveways that go off to another area that's overland flow to a control area that we can impound something and be able to create the benefit of that impoundment to do some removal. So it's a series of treatment trains. All of them together add up and we provide all the water quality volume that we need in terms of water quality volume. We have submitted that calculation and those calculations are there. Now, there is, in terms of how the houses, rain gardens, we have rain gardens for the houses that when they're appropriate. Every house has a infiltration system as well as to what the commission has purported to want over the years, and it's a good practice. And we have provided a number of like I say, treatment trains that all in together, when they all work together, do the job. And they do the job because we have provided the water quality volume calculation to demonstrate that. Now, in terms of design, yeah, there are certain specifics within the state stormwater water quality manual that have specifics for detention or extended bioretention systems and that sort of thing.
But they say you don't meet those requirements.
It's only one basin, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's not all the other areas because none of them outside of one is the one which is where the house is, the existing house is.
Right, right.
And that's it. So I'm going to, as a lead into that, Steve, treatment trains work on volume and total capacity. So the water that leaves that basin is actually going across the street out to an outfall pipe that has a tremendous, tremendous length before it even touches a wetland, well over 200 feet. And that's through a grassy area that is well vegetated and well established. See, when you start adding all the components up, are we accomplishing the goal? Absolutely, we're accomplishing the goal. I'm not here to pick out pieces and say you don't do this, you don't do that. You have to look at the whole picture. And the whole picture tells the story that it does meet the letter of the law when it comes down to providing water quality so that we do not impair the wetlands on this site. Because first, like I've said, it's a disconnection. Second, there are no direct connections to the wetlands, none. That in itself provides a significant benefit in terms of pollutant removal.
Mark, they're saying all the water's going to come down the driveways and go right into the pipes and right into the wetlands. So you're using the wetlands to renovate the water.
No, that's not true. That's not true at all.
Okay.
That's absolutely not true. So I'm going to give you a perfect example.
So I want to ask Steve because this is where.
No, I need to finish on his component
okay.
of the fact that he is purporting that, you know, these the drainage swales that are on the side of the driveway are going to not work during the wintertime. Well, that is not going to be the case. Those drainage swales are right off the shoulder. And with anybody that does any work and does snow plowing, whatever, they don't just do it just to the edge and they're gone. And I'm going to be a perfect case with this. My own street in Southbury, we've been doing this for a long time. I have a 12.5% grade on my drive, on our main road. And the water that comes off the hill goes into an under drain, no different than what we're providing here. And those drains work all winter long. And the reason why is heat, which Steve is not telling you, and I've seen this before. He purported this in Fairfield on a job in which he had the same question asked to him. And the answer was, wait a minute, you have thermal heat coming up from the underground surface that actually removes the snow. And that's the truth, because when you provide a deep enough swale with an underdrain that's over 42, 48 inches deep, you create a thermal heat sink that eventually will come up and it melts the snow in that edge. So, you know, this is how it works, and I'm going to say that that's how it will work here. So, but to that extent, the water doesn't just run down the drain. There is leak-offs. There are collection points that we have that go into subsurface detention systems that are collected by yard drains. So again, it all is the whole picture, and decentralizing the system is the key to success on this site, and not to get involved where you are trying to centralize, where that can happen if you were just to put a series of catch basins and just collect it and just run it down to the end. Yes, but that's not what's happening here. That's not how this system has been designed.
Okay.
With that, what I need to do, because one of the things that is very important for us to understand, and I want the commission, is I would like to be able to introduce two folks. One, I would like to get Ray Gennaro up to be able to talk to the commission about some of the misrepresentation that rock removal has got a problem with creating pollution to wetlands and issues. And I believe that Ray will be able to answer your questions. He submitted a report, and he's a highly valuable geotechnical engineer. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Ray Gennaro, if that's okay.
Please do.
Good evening, everyone. I understand it's late, so I'll try and make this as straightforward as possible. For the record, my name is Ray Gennaro, licensed professional engineer, several states, including Connecticut, principal engineer with Down to Earth Consulting, geotechnical engineering firm located in Naugatuck, Connecticut. I'm a rock guy. I know I submitted the resume about quickly, master's degree in geotechnical engineering from MIT, member of the rock mechanics group, and I currently serve as a technical reviewer for the Journal of Rock Mechanics and Rock Engineering. So rock is my life, and get into the site a little bit. But I'll be honest to the commission, I don't think I've ever been involved with a project that has so little rock removal on it as this one. So usually I get involved with bigger projects. Obviously, we're talking hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of rock removal and whatnot. And so happy to be a part of this project, certainly. My objective is to ease concerns associated with rock removal. If and when blasting may be required for this project. Mr. Chairman, I used to serve as an adjunct professor at the University of New Haven. I am accustomed to getting interrupted. So if at any time you or other commissioners feel it'd be prudent to interrupt me, feel free. More than happy to answer any and all questions. So let's talk about the site. Again, 65 acres, right? And what we're proposing is removing less than 10,000 cubic yards of rock material. Let's talk about the rock a little bit. It's a metamorphic formation, and Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you are a licensed PG as well.
I am. Yep.
Yeah, so.
I'm a rock guy too.
Yeah,
I live-
exactly.
I live on Garnet Road in Roxbury. I mean, what's better than that?
There you go. So I think you and I are the only two here that probably care about rock.
Right.
But I don't want to bore anybody, but I'll get into it. The rock formation, I had the opportunity to go on a site walk with Mark Lancourt. He was able to give me the nickel tour, so to speak. And we're able to walk through the various driveways, access ways into these houses. I will say, I'd like to commend Mark, being a rock guy, again, is that one of the things he did capture here, contrary to what many developers don't really care about, is protecting the inherent beauty of these rock formations, these rock outcrops. The way he's orientated these driveways and kind of meander around these existing rock outcrops, me personally, not only preserving the inherent beauty of these outcrops, but two, you're also minimizing the amount of rock excavation that would be required for this project and any associated impacts. And so the rock formation, it's a metamorphic rock, it's schist, and it's highly foliated. So what does that mean? It means that this rock is basically structurally set up in layers. Why does anybody care about that? Because it is in layers, it weathers in slab-like fashions, and it's easily excavated. So in areas where we did encounter, and looking at the test pit data and based on my observations during the site visit, I believe a majority of this rock will be able to be excavated mechanically with large excavators, whatnot. There are certain areas that may require more aggressive forms of rock excavation, blasting. And those areas that I've identified, primarily the entrances off Route 199, I would recommend blasting in those areas. And I'll get into the blasting and you know, ease some individuals' concerns. You get a better product. So on the side of the road, by removing, and I'm looking at the site plan here, I see lot 4, lot 2, lot 1 as well. You need to remove rock, obviously, to maintain access, to achieve access to these lots. But what you're also doing is that you are improving sightline issues on that road. And I'm sure, you know, the DOT would be very happy with that as well. So you had a benefit. And again, lot 1, you have up to a 10-foot cut in rock. Lot 2, probably about 20-foot cut in rock. Blasting would be appropriate. So what is blasting? Blasting is a method of rock removal that's been around for centuries. It is a science. It is a process by which rock removal is done very effectively and very efficiently. I've been involved with projects where we've done blasting in downtown in Manhattan, right next to the Javits Center building, right next to the high-rise buildings. There's a lot of bedrock in Manhattan. And by implementing various controls that I'll be getting into, not only are you going to achieve a good product at the end of the day, in this case here, we have various rock cut slopes, but then also by implementing these controls, you are protecting the public and you are protecting property. And in this case as well, I'll also add, you'll be protecting the wetlands too. And I'll get into some of the various things that we'll do to protect that, the various wetlands there. So, when it comes, so it's a bit unusual for me to get into the whole blasting. procedure. Typically, it's a planning and zoning type of thing, but I'll get into it quickly. Again, I know it's late. So what I developed was an 8-page spec that will require, again, if blasting is required. I can tell you that there will be many lots where blasting will not be required. Most of this rock will be rippable and easily removable, and cuts are not that significant. In certain areas, like we discussed, it will be required and would be recommended. So my 8-page spec essentially goes above and beyond standard of practice, right? So again, to the process again, all these controls that are implemented, again, what's our objective? To protect public safety and to protect property. So first and foremost, what is required in the 8-page spec that will be attached? It was submitted. It will be attached as part of these project documents. First and foremost, a blasting plan is put together. That's where the drilling subcontractor puts together all his means and methods for rock removal, all the equipment, all the tooling, all the materials, everything, including how he or she is going to protect neighboring parcels, wetlands, public safety. That comes to us for review. It gets vetted out. That also gets submitted after we vet it out and provide commentary to the Roxbury Fire Marshal. And again, just to remind everybody, a blasting permit has to be obtained by the Roxbury Fire Marshal before any blasting activities can occur on this site. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you brought up the fact that they have to provide insurance, proof of insurance. They have to provide a bond as well, and various other things. And they have to demonstrate that their proposed blasting activities will conform to not only local regulations, but also state and federal regulations. It's a very regulated activity, blasting, and understandably so. So prior to any blasting activities on the site, while the drilling subcontractor is preparing their blasting plan, while they're submitting that for their permit for the through the Roxbury Fire Marshal, we will do condition surveys of any nearby structures, again, specified in the specification. For this particular, again, 65 acres, when we're in the city, it's one thing, but I don't really see many structures that are within 500 feet, a radius of 500 feet from proposed blasting activities. So I don't think it's going to be an issue, but if there is, we offer a conditions survey, and that's where we go in. Typically, if there's a nearby structure or whatnot, go in, we document existing conditions. Videography, photographs, an engineer is out there during the process. And I would even offer to the commission that we could certainly and pretty easily do that of the surrounding wetlands. We could document, again, it's pretty straightforward, videography, photographs is part of our process, document the conditions of the wetlands before and after rock excavation activities. And to put any, certainly to put everyone at ease there. So the condition survey is done. Blasting plan has been reviewed. It's been vetted by us. It's been vetted by a Roxbury Fire Marshal. And then a test blast is typically performed in a remote area of the site. One of the things that is important with blasting, and some of your constituents brought up some concerns, and understandably so, about groundwater wells and whatnot. Seismic monitoring is always conducted and will certainly be conducted on these various projects during, and that's one of the reasons for the test blast, to determine how much of an impact, how much vibrations will be developed with the proposed blasting activity. Going back to the rock formation and how it's weathered, slab-like, easily weathered, I don't envision a lot of energy being required to remove rock, right? If we're talking about a massive rock feature, granite walls, whatnot, you're going to need more energy to blast and to excavate the rock. But because this rock formation is highly foliated, extremely weathered, it's not going to require much energy, right, in order to excavate or to blast that rock. So I don't anticipate any issues, but again, standard practice, we do the test blast to confirm what the vibration levels are. We establish threshold levels, And during blasting activities, seismographs are set up at various key locations. Property lines, if there's a neighboring structure, and essentially any structure of importance. And again, don't forget as well, these lots are going to be sold individually. So this is a process, and again, I don't think many of the lots will require blasting, but it's not like blasting activities are going to take place throughout this entire 64-acre site simultaneously, right? It's going to be a process that probably only takes days for what is required, again, based on my experience. And it'll be done not only safely, but effectively while protecting adjacent structures. And in this case here, absolutely, the adjacent wetlands. And any questions regarding blasting, any concerns, anything that I could address before I get into wetland specific comments?
One concern that I've heard is the potential effect on neighboring wells. Can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good concern. And I've heard that as well. So it's a bit interesting because it all depends on who you ask about the concern with the wells. So a lot of times during supply well construction, and this is also applicable with the fracking industry as well, you want to encourage fractures, right, in order to get more production with the supply wells and whatnot. So depending on who, yeah, sometimes that's a good thing. In this case here, obviously we don't want to have any impact, right? So that's where the seismic monitoring and the seismographs and the test blasts are going to help us. And we're going to establish threshold values, right, for the vibrate. Here are our tolerances, right, for not causing any damage for neighboring structures, groundwater supply wells and whatnot. Here are our limiting values that are going to be at significant reductions to what we consider to be safe levels. And again, given the fact, I cannot speak whether a groundwater supply well survey has been completed for this project. If it has not been completed, I'm going to recommend that it is completed for the project. Again, and typically what that is, you go on the, typically, this is something within Mark Lancour's realm, but we want to know any groundwater supply wells that are within a 500-foot radius from proposed blasting activities. And again, I will say, by implementing controlled blasting techniques, we have, like I said, in New York City, we've blasted right next to high-rise buildings, and those high-rise buildings haven't felt anything, right? You have good blasters that practice good practices, and you have not so good blasters. This is the reason why I was asked to partake in this project and develop this 8-page spec to again, ensure that there's not going to be any impact to neighboring supply wells, neighboring structures, neighboring wetlands. So I guess to answer your question then, during the test blasts, we're going to monitor the seismographs. We're going to monitor what we do. We set them up. We have the test blasts. We're going to set up a seismograph 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet. And we're going to detonate that charge. We're going to monitor the vibrations. That's how we know, okay, for this bedrock material, here's what we expect for vibrations. Based on published data, we know that these are where our tolerances are for not having any impact on neighboring structures, neighboring supply wells. We're going to reduce those significantly for this project and establish limiting values. And essentially, that's how we're going to make sure there's no impact. And again, so after blasting is completed, we do the condition survey again, neighboring structures, wetlands, whatnot, to demonstrate there hasn't been an impact. And again, the seismograph data that's going to be strategically located in various locations, property lines or whatnot, that data, that science, as Mr. Chairman said, is going to demonstrate that we're not having any impact on neighboring parcels. That's a great question.
Can blasting adjacent or near a wetland dry it up by creating fissures underground?
It can. Yes, it can. And commonly I get asked to participate in these types of hearings for that reason. I can tell you it's not going to happen on this project. So imagine, if you will, if we were excavating rock at lower elevations compare where the wetlands are established, then yes, that's a potential, right? Because we have a gradient now. We have water coming from the wetlands down into our excavation, right? And this here, a majority of blasting activities, a couple of exceptions right near North Street, obviously because we need to achieve grade, and we have the swales right there, but say 95%, rock excavation, blasting activities are going to take place above wetland levels.
But can those fissures go below the wetland level?
You know, exactly. For the blasting project, and again, one thing that we care about is overbreak. And again, that's going to be addressed in their blasting plan. We want to make sure that they use controlled blasting operations such that overbreak or fissures, what we're referring to as fissures, only take place about 1 foot to 2 feet beyond our area of blasting. 1 to 2 feet. And again, let's not forget as well, given the bedrock formation here, it is a highly foliated rock that is already fissured. And again, blasting activities, it's going to take place at elevations higher than where our wetlands are. So again, I don't see any concerns, any issues associated with potentially draining the wetlands or creating fissures that would potentially have an impact on the surrounding wetlands. But that's another good question. We see that a lot as well, especially for deep excavations adjacent to surrounding wetlands. Any other questions? This is all good. So again, I'll wrap it up. What specific concerns that were brought up to me for this particular project that I just want to clear up from a rock excavation standpoint, right? So drilling and blasting, rock excavation are methods that are conducted in the dry. I had heard someone had suggested that for the process of drilling, you introduce water, and that's going to put an additional burden on your erosion control systems. Whoever suggests, and again, I don't know who suggested that or whatnot, but they have never seen drilling and blasting done before, because think about it. If you can't introduce water, because how are you going to get your blasting agents down the hole? So what is used is a rotary percussion. They drill with air and a percussion in order to drill to where their target depths are. Again, proposed subgrade levels, and in order to drop in their blasting agents, their packing and everything. It cannot. Blasting underwater is a very specialized rock excavation method, but it's not done here. Everything will be done in the dry. No additional burden to existing sedimentation control systems. And so we already addressed the wetlands, the proposed cuts. A very good question. Higher elevated compared to the wetlands. Therefore, any concern about the draining of wetlands, whatnot. The available exploratory information that were done. So dozens of test pits were conducted, not only by DIMAR, but also by some other consultant earlier on, none of which encountered groundwater in the test pits. So, and again, the amount of rock excavation, I don't anticipate, again, there's no data that would suggest that we would be intercepting the groundwater table and having any potential impact on the groundwater table either. And again, so for this project, again, I think this is one of the smallest ones I've ever been a part of. I appreciate everyone's concern, regarding potential impacts, not only to the wetlands, but also to surrounding structures. And again, I am confident that with the specification that we develop, that will be tied into this project with the additional oversight that we will be providing during rock excavation that we will not impact these surrounding wetlands with our rock excavation efforts, and also public safety, neighboring parcels, right? As Mr. Chairman, you pointed out, there are acronyms at the end of our names, and we could be held personally liable if we don't do things appropriately, if we do things negligently. And the whole objective for my involvement with this project is to make sure there is no impact. And again, because of the oath I took, I will ensure that will be the case. I think that's it.
I have a couple questions to ask.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that I just want to make sure that I was following everything, that you're only going to be doing the potential blasting on lot 1 and lot 2. Is that correct?
That is going to be at the discretion of the earthworks contractor. And again, as these
So we're
lots,
not sure of the extent then of on the parcels then yet.
it's all means and methods. So the contractor arrives on site, right, and they assess the situation. Not all contractors have the same equipment. So if you were to hand me a shovel and say, okay, dig 5 feet into rock, I would not be able to do that. But if with a large excavator, potentially with ripper teeth and whatnot, they'd be able to achieve that 5 feet without a problem, right? So it will be at the discretion of the contractor. And again, because of the regulatory burden that's imposed on blasting activities, many contractors would prefer not to blast. They would prefer to get some bigger equipment in there to remove the rock mechanically. And again, based on USGS mapping,
Okay, well, you're saying
observations.
What I'm wondering then is, I'm sorry, but
No worries.
we're not going to know like what sites then that's going to be necessary on these driveways, because I would think that if you're looking at the rocks and the rock outcroppings, that you would be able to tell the commission. We would know more than saying that when the contractor gets there, then they're going to determine it at that time, and we wouldn't know ahead of time.
No, that's not the case. So you need to think of it in the sense that if and when the contractor is proposing blasting, various other control measures are triggered, my involvement being included. So to answer your question, based on my experience, I would recommend blasting for lot 2. For lot 2, given that 20-foot cut, because one of the things I would not want is to have an unsafe product at the end of the day. Blasting is going to provide a much cleaner rock cut, a much safer rock cut. So I would recommend blasting for lot 2. And again, given the existing subsurface information, I do see, again, based on my experience, a benefit in blasting at various other, potentially lot 1, again, because we have an 8-foot cut. But I've seen projects where contractors have excavated 20 feet into weathered rock using mechanical equipment, more aggressive methods as well, wedges and whatnot. So what they would do in some cases, they would drill a pre-split line, for example, to establish what that slope is going to be, and they use mechanical tools, wedges and whatnot, to excavate the rock without blasting. Because again, it's not cheap to blast, right? So that's not at all. And so you couple that with the regulatory burden, and most earthwork contractors would not prefer to blast. So again, I envision there's 6 lots here. I envision 6 different earthwork contractors, right? As these lots are sold, as they are individually developed. And I understand there's a local regulatory process that Mark Lancourt-Dimer was talking about. So there's more opportunity to get into the specifics regarding each lot. But there are going to be 6 different earthworks contractors potentially with 6 different ways and preferences in terms of excavating bedrock. I cannot direct them. You have to blast here. You don't have to blast here. You can't blast there. However, if they throw the idea around, okay, I think we need to blast. Okay, light switch, it triggers all these additional control measures that we're going to, again, 8 pages that we're going to implement to make sure that blasting activities exceed standard of care.
All right, so just to save time, just my second question is, you said that you're doing rotary, you would be doing drilling, rotary drilling for the blasting material, correct?
Yeah, you need to drill holes.
So does that have, I guess what I wanted to know, does that have any kind of like lubricants and things like that on it? So would it be a factor as if you hit any kind of groundwater, would that be an issue for anything?
No, that's a great question. We don't anticipate being below the groundwater table. There are different blasting agents that are used for blasting underwater. It's a percussion drill. It's fueled, drilled, it spins by air compression. And so that does one of 2 things. You're drilling down, you're drilling your bit down, but it also cleans the hole as you come up. So all that you would see is an anthill, a pile of dust at the base of your hole. And then the drillers come back out, clean it out before they lower their blasting agents, check all the depths and everything like that to make sure they're in conformance with their blasting plan.
How deep do you drill?
We have our proposed subgrade levels.
Yep.
And again, it depends on the amount of overburden. So we recommend, if there's some soil overburden, like this is the case here, leaving that in place, not disturbing it, because it provides more protection, right? So during the blasting process, we lower the rubber tire mats. We typically recommend 2 layers of the rubber tire mats, but any soil overburden that we can get, and typically the rule of thumb, Mr. Chairman, is 8 feet. We want to make sure that the bottom of our hole is 8 feet from where our ground surface is. And in some areas where that cannot be achieved, that's where we make sure we have provisions in place to do that. But we don't over drill more than we need to, because one, and again, developer costs, right? It's a lot more expensive. And 2, it's not needed because the way the energy disperses is laterally, right? And again, you do have some component vertical, but it's limited to a couple of feet. Again, this is a science that has been around for centuries, and again, it's one of the most regulated activities in terms of earthworks goes that exists, because you not only have the local component, you not only have the state component, you have the federal component, and so you got to make sure that again, given the site, again, the amount of impact, again, less than 10,000 cubic yards of material over a 64-acre site. That's nominal. So again, I think that's a further testament to the site developer who worked out the grades, worked out kind of working around these existing outcrops in order to minimize disturbance, minimize the again, not impacting the inherent beauty of these rock outcrops that are more prevalent in the southern limits of the site. But I again, for this project, it very straightforward, and again, I can assure you that there will be no impact to the wetlands associated with rock excavation activities.
Thank you, Ray.
Not a
Very
problem, Mr. Chairman.
educational. Mark, leading on that, one of the things Michael Klein said would cause an impact is when you're going to process that rock, you're going to make gravel out of it, correct?
We don't know that. We don't know that. That really comes down to whoever buys the lot and processing. You can process. We've, in any plan that if you're doing that, one of the attributes of actually limiting the amount of disturbance. I mean, rock is, when it gets moved, especially on lot 1 and lot 2, it's in the front end. A lot of that rock is because we provided earthwork calcs to the commission. You can see that it's a net export on the lots, which is actually you know, I'd rather have a net export than have a net import. Because on an export, you can remove the rock, put it in a machine. If they're not going to use it, they can take it off site. And a lot of times today, contractors actually take the rock off site, process it on their own site, and bring it back. So that's a common practice today.
Right, but Michael Klein was concerned about when you process gravel. He's right. You need to use water, and then you need to treat, you know, to clean the gravel, and then you need to treat the water. And in your plan, you said you would use normal means like flatulence or stuff like that.
Can I opine?
Well, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, so again, we're going to have 6 different lots, potentially 6 different earthworks contractors, one of which may have a lot right up the road. They're going to direct load onto trucks. They're going to process at their plant off-site because it's going to be more economical for them.
Well, one thing the commission could do then is just prohibit any on-site, any on-site processing, unless there's a better plan on how to handle the water.
And again, typically what the contractors do, they crush this material. They use a crusher on site. There's no water that's added.
Michael Klein seemed to think you need water to wash the gravel.
There are certain quarries, O&G, Tilcon, whatnot, that produce a crushed stone product, like 3/4 stone, 1.25 stone, because they're selling crushed stone product. But again, that would not be the case here. No contractor that I know of would ever do that on site if they wanted to make a crushed stone product. But again, what they do, they throw it in a crusher. The crusher teeth is set at like 3.5 inch minus. Everything gets crushed together, and you get a beautiful structural fill that the contractor is going to use on another site that needs fill.
Right. Okay.
They're not going to spend time washing product on site to create crushed stone. I mean, I don't even know what they would use to crush stone on the site.
Right,
on
you're right.
On the driveway?
The processed material, though, you typically don't wash that material either.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Stone, you know, it's a clean crushed stone, I think was what Mr. Klein was referring to. But again, typically you put processed aggregate under driveways.
Yes. Yeah, and to your point, Ray, where are you going to get the water? In order
out of the wetland?
No, you won't get it out of the wetlands. But I mean, where are you getting the water?
I don't think there's enough water in the wetlands either.
No, there isn't.
That's a significant operation.
Wash
That
plant
is.
does require a significant amount of water, and that's not going to be the case here. We're not providing a wash plant. It would be just a standard crushing operation that they would use for their product for fill, and they can take it down to a smaller process that they need. But any of the clean stone that we would need, that is what we call the wash product, would have to come from another source.
So the plan, Mark, so the commission's clear, and just to be clear to the commission, I agree with Michael Klein that we need to look at this as if the houses that are shown are going to be built. I think that was a good point that he made. So we need to look at this as if those houses are going to be built where they're shown, because that's what we're approving. Now, it still needs to come before us again as each lot gets developed. Whether, even if the plan doesn't change, they still need to come back to us, just to make that clear.
We agree.
But Mark, is the plan to sell the lots as wooded land, and each buyer builds their own driveway? Is that what the plan is?
That's the developer is not a builder.
All right.
They're going to sell the lots individually. So to your point, Mr. Chairman, yes, each lot would come back before you with a plan that's specific to the lot.
That's right. There'd be even more detail per lot.
Yeah, in terms of there'll be even more detail, and there's a lot of detail on these plans. I mean, somebody can go with, but if somebody comes up with a different house style or whatever, it all comes back to the commission, but with the goal that the components that are impaired, that are with the plan, have to follow through. It's not like we're going to come back and all of a sudden I'm crossing wetlands. That's not going to happen.
Well, yeah, once the subdivision's approved, that's really what we're supposed to be looking at, is making sure that if it is approved, it doesn't create a problem with wetlands. That's
exactly
normally what our focus is. This is being looked at with a lot of focus on it, as if each lot never has to come back, like it's approved and we're done. We're not done.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it's possible, I know Bill Kenny has been waiting to talk a little bit because he's got some information I think is very informative and helpful to the commission. And I would like to have him
love to hear from Bill. Go ahead.
Mr. Bill, are you there? Where is Bill Kenny?
Ask his wife to wake him up.
Here. I'm here.
He's here.
Hey,
Bill's
Bill.
here?
Sorry about the delay.
No.
Hi, Bill.
You're up, Bill.
Good evening. If possible, I'd love to be able to share my screen.
Go ahead. It's all yours, right?
Yep, 1 second. Okay. So good evening again. I am Bill Kenny. I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm a professional wetland scientist, soil scientist, and landscape architect. I have a degree in environmental management from the Yale School of Forestry, and when I studied there 30 years ago, a primary focus of my study was ecosystem hydrology. Really learning about, studying, measuring, getting out in the field, measuring, watching, evaluating the movement of water through the land, surface water, groundwater. So educated in that and working in water movement, water quality for the last 30 years with my land use planning consulting that I do. And so I certainly want to get into those discussions tonight because Chairman, you were mentioning what are the big picture items here. And certainly when I look at a project that I'm going to evaluate for potential impacts to a wetland, first thing is there an activity in the wetland? And as we've all concluded, there's no activities in the wetlands as compared to the previous application. And then the next thing is, all right, what are you doing in the non-wetland areas that could potentially affect those wetland areas? And then really it comes down to water management then, because and we've all been discussing that. So, and I'd like to start by going into, when you look at stormwater management, surface water management, whether it be during construction or after construction, there's really two primary components to that. One is, what are you doing to change the source of pollutants? So generation, how are you managing the generation of source management? And the primary way, particularly with LID, and Mr. Trinkus, I know he has a lot of expertise in LID. The two primary things at the top of the list with LID is minimize your disturbance, maximize your open space and your undeveloped land. This is a really a display project for LID. There is such a maximization of non-disturbance. And the second thing is, with LID, is to minimize your impervious surface. And I'm actually quite surprised how some people are trying to diminish the significance of impervious cover. It is, every drainage manual starts with a discussion on how impervious cover is directly related to degradation or not of wetlands and watercourses. And there's been studies throughout the country, and even Mr. Trinkus's drainage manuals, he references that. And I think I was a bit concerned with some of his math because it just doesn't add up. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit. The impervious cover, it's not just the percent impervious, but it's how your impervious is laid out, the shape of it. Is it long and thin, or is it one big block? Its location from the wetland or the watercourse, is it immediately adjacent to it, or is it set back from it? And then the massing, is it one big block again, or is it multiple pieces? And when you can minimize the amount of impervious, take long, thin pieces of impervious, move the impervious surfaces away from the wetlands and watercourses, and then break them up into multiple pieces. You're doing everything. And that, particularly at about 2.5% impervious, the literature just shows that watersheds with this level of impervious, even without BMP, because the first part is minimize the sources of pollutants. The second part is, if you're going to have pollutants, put in BMPs to remove those pollutants. But what the literature says is, if you're below 10%, that there just isn't an impact. And intuitively, it really makes sense. So we're at 2.5% impervious. Say you had a jar of marbles that are 100 marbles in a jar. You take 2.5 of those marbles and say you increased it by 50%. So you have another 1.25 marbles. So you end up with 3.25 marbles or 1.25 marbles. So you went from 100 marbles to 1.25 marbles. You may have had a 50% increase at that very low percentage, but when you apply that across the entire site, you're only having a 1%, 1 to 2% change. And that is just so de minimis that what the studies show over and over again, if you're below 10%, your watercourses and your wetlands are remaining healthy. And when you're at that low percentage, you spread it out, make it long and thin, you disconnect it, multiple pieces, you have great success. And so,
Bill, the problem I'm having, and I'm sure the other commissioners are having, is Michael Klein doesn't agree with that, doesn't agree that the calculations are correct. He's written a letter, and it's very rare for somebody to say without a doubt. He didn't. I'm saying this not verbatim, but he said this will have an impact on wetlands. I mean, without he had no doubt in his mind. So,
with all due respect, I'm quite surprised. You're viewing what is being proposed.
Right.
If we took all that impervious and put it into one mass, one block, put it right against the wetland, 15, 20 feet off the wetland, then you're going to have an impact potential for, you're going to need BMPs next to this, incorporated within this to protect this. And I also want to say, we're not saying we're not adding BMPs. We have BMPs throughout this, and Mark has designed these things in accordance with the standards and good engineering practices. I'm just saying, even without those BMPs, we have quite a safety margin. If you design like this, well, then you don't have a safety margin. And these professionals, they know this. I just really think it's important to show some of these other projects. This is a project, I was on the Shellfish Commission in Fairfield for 12 years, and this is on a project on the tidal section of the Mill River in Fairfield. Our shellfish beds are just downstream of this, the only beds that we have open in town. Here's a project with 39% impervious. The consultants on this that vigorously defended this and said there'd be no impacts on this wetland, which is only the stream, the river, 20 feet off the impervious. It was Steve Trinkus and Michael Klein's office. Whereas engineers and wetland scientists, they said you could have 30% impervious cover with BMPs. And you know what? I've been in situations like this, and I come to that conclusion because the BMPs are there to treat the runoff off these surfaces. But it's really, it's a two-step process. First, You try to minimize the impervious surface. You try to maximize undeveloped land. And then when you can't, you do your BMPs. We're doing both.
Right.
This other project, they weren't able to do the first part. So they had to rely 100% on the BMPs and then conclude there's no impact. And this project was approved by the town because of their professional testimony.
Wow.
And
because Fairfield's a tough commission, I know that for a fact.
yes, and it was an affordable housing project, so it wasn't the town really didn't want it, and so they were looking for any reason to deny that. And this is a project I worked on with Marjorie, and I enjoyed working with her. Here's a site in Guilford, 23% impervious, and you look at these sites, everything's massed together. The impervious is 20, 30 feet off the wetland. It's massed together. You need to rely 100% really on those BMPs, because if the BMPs fail, there's nothing beyond them.
Are those homes? Are
Those are homes? Yes, these were small homes, like a village type concept.
Yeah.
So there's some green in there, but it's mostly impervious surface within there. And if we were
just for everybody's information, because we have a lot of the public here, BMPs is best management practices, right, Bill?
That's correct.
Yeah.
For stormwater, management practices for managing stormwater.
Right.
So, there's times where you support a project like this with those high impervious surfaces, and so these people have, and I think the reference to this document not being significant or applicability is just misleading.
What is that document, Bill? We couldn't see it.
This is the TMDL document.
Okay.
For the Eagleville watershed in Connecticut. The purpose for showing this wasn't to say that certainly this is a different watershed in a different part of the state. The purpose for including this is that the state of Connecticut spent a lot of time and money to research all the studies done on impervious cover, to the point where they proposed this document as a management method for a watershed. And how watersheds come in all different sizes. You have a large watershed and a lot of micro watersheds within it. You cannot achieve the impervious cover for a certain watershed without, the only way you can manage that is on a property by property basis. Mr. Trinkus said if it's 2.5% in one, 2.5% in another, you add those up. You don't add up percentages. That's incorrect math. If every sub-watershed was 2.5%, the total watershed is still 2.5%. You don't add up percentages. You add up acres, or you add up an area, an absolute area. So if you start with a 100-acre watershed and you have 2.5 acres impervious, then you add another 2.5 acres impervious, then you have 5% covered. But 2.5% in each sub-watershed results in just 2.5%. So that I assume he misspoke on that. But in this document, they acknowledge that if you could keep it under 10%, you're doing great. If you go above 10%, then you should use the BMPs. Now, certainly the state regulation, the stormwater quality manual, everyone likes to require you to have those BMPs. But just because you're required at these lower percentages doesn't mean it's necessary, but it's a good thing. And it's being done here. So we've reduced the source load way below standards, way below, 4 or 5 times below the 10% standard, four times. And plus we're doing all the BMPs. If we had the percent cover of those 2 other projects I showed you, it would be this much of the site would be impervious.
Well, it wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah.
This town.
Yeah. And so there was 4 things with impervious cover: the amount, how it's located, how it's masked, its location to the wetlands. Another thing is the use, the intensity. If it's a gas station on the main road in town, one, there's the potential pollutants are more extreme, and the amount of usage is higher usage. These driveways, one, they have the potential to have greater pollutants than the roof, no doubt. But these are not, this is not a Home Depot parking lot. Very low use. You know, maybe the owners come or go a few times a day, maybe one or two delivery trucks. Very, very low use. So the potential for pollutants to come off a vehicle and be transported to the driveway, it's going to happen, but it's going to be very, very low. So we have a very low intensity use, very low amount of impervious surface, spread out, it's disconnected, and then we do all the BMPs that Mark has described. So I've worked on many projects over many years, and this really is a project for LID to show as something really to be proud of, and really an LID project. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about during construction. It's a similar concept. So you want to talk about source, and then you want to talk about management of the pollutant load. So just as in the long-term development of the site, we try to reduce the amount of impervious cover, the amount of land development. During construction, at any one point in time, one strategy is to reduce the amount of any area of the site that is disturbed at any time. And the applicant is proposing and pleased to agree to phasing the construction on each lot. And so we're showing here on these drawings that the areas that would be disturbed at any one point on each lot, and it would be less than an acre at any one point on each lot. So this tan area, if each lot was developed at the same time, which is very unlikely, you'd have 3.7 acres total disturbed at one point. And again, they're broken up. It's not one concentrated area. They're relatively linear, and they're less than an acre on each lot. And so even if you did them all at the same time, that's the first phase. This is the second phase. It's about 4 acres, just over 4 acres. And then quickly, the total area of disturbance starts dropping significantly. By the third phase, lots 5, 6, and 1 are done. Then you just have some small areas with 2, 3, and 4. And then by the 4th and 5th phase, you're just working on lot 3.
But Bill, if they sell these lots separately, what control do they have?
Well, this is a worst case. This is a worst case.
Okay. I mean, the way COVID's going, I could tell you from my own business, people are coming up here in droves looking for lots like this. So all 6 of these could sell at once.
Right. So this shows you building all 6 at the same time.
Okay. All right. Now I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the worst case scenario. You know, I've been interested in, this is a minor point, I've been interested in water movement for many years, and for 5 years, from when I was 10 to 15 or so, I delivered papers and walked the streets in the winter and looked at water drains along the street and the snow piles. And what you'll see is that there's melting at the bottom of the snow pile, and there's a crust of ice that forms, and the water actually runs under the snow. And there might be some areas where the snow touches the ground, the piles touch, but the majority of the water finds its way under the snow, and there becomes a gap a ½ inch or an inch high that allows the water to run under. And that's been my experience, is that in these areas, if you had a pile of snow along the side of the road, the ground is warmer. It starts to melt from the bottom up on the pile, and the water moving through is also warmer. So it creates openings that allows the water to melt below the snow piles.
Okay.
That is the scope of the information I wanted to get into.
Okay. It's 10 o'clock and we have a Zoom limit. And I think that after 3 hours, people, especially the commission who are trying to absorb all this, start to lose focus. So if it's okay with everybody, the commission, I'm asking, we obviously should continue this public hearing so that we give the interveners the opportunity to comment back. I really would like to have more of a debate next time so that specific allegations, let's call it for lack of a better word, get understood by the commission, because we have one consultant saying you're not using Connecticut guidelines, you don't meet this. I mean, you've read the letters. But you guys are saying we meet everything. In fact, we're doing more than what you would need to do on a 2.5% impervious surface for that area. So to the commission, do you agree we should continue this public hearing?
Yes.
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 Okay, then we will do that. We will, does anybody want to do this? I don't know, Karen, could we do it in 2 weeks because of public notice? What's it? Does anybody, would we like to do this as a separate meeting before the regular meeting?
14 weeks, we probably could. I think we need 10 days.
Okay. I'm just throwing that out there. It's whatever the commission wants. We've been lucky that we have some easy applications coming in, but they're not going to that's not going to continue. And you can see next month with Dennis's application, that could be lengthy, you know. Do we want to do this in 2 weeks and
2 weeks
and then
is
have
fine.
Rob, or would you rather just do it in a month like we normally do?
I'd rather do it in a month.
In a month, Sue?
Yes.
I'm fine either way.
All right.
Month would be September 22nd.
All right. Well, I'll ask Marjorie as the representative for the experts on your side. Would you rather more time?
I don't think we care.
Okay. So nobody cares. And it's
Mr. Chairman, I care.
Yeah, thank you.
Good decision, Ross. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Mr. Chairman, if I might have a word?
Sure.
Michael Klein for the intervener.
Yeah.
I completely concur with your request to provide additional information in a more timely manner. 2 weeks makes it very difficult to for us to look at the applicants' responses and respond back to them, especially given the fact that there's a long weekend in there.
Yeah, I hear you, Mike. Let's have it in a month like we normally do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hear you. I know. I feel your pain. And if all of us, if all of the experts, could you please get the stuff in as early as you can? And I ask that for us too. We like to read stuff before a meeting and understand it so we could prepare questions. But more is for Karen and poor Julian and Jimmy, the guy who uploads all this stuff. It's very hard for them right now. We're a part-time town hall. We're a small town. We don't have the resources that a lot of other towns that we're all used to working in have. So putting it in the Friday before the meeting, it's just going to make the thing extend. And sooner or later, I think it's only fair to everybody that we end this and make a decision once all the information is in. So I ask that everybody get everything in by the Wednesday before the meeting. That gives us time to read it. It gives Karen time and Jimmy time to get it put together, upload it, and then do the list. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, that is, that'll be the 16th of September.
That's correct.
What? 4
As
weeks
far
from
as
now?
any information that needs to be submitted, it's got to be submitted by the 16th of September.
Okay.
Right. That's the Wednesday.
Okay, yes. Mike, does that work for you?
There we
Michael
go.
Klein?
Sorry. Yep. No, I was just clicking on the wrong button there.
All right.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we're gonna see what Mr. Lancor and Mr. Kenny are gonna write, and they're gonna see what we're gonna write, and we're gonna have probably all of us will have additional thoughts to discuss. But I apologize for being so late in my submittal this time, and I will certainly make the 16th submittal for my comments based on everything we've seen to date.
That's fine, Mike. It's a tough time. It really is. I understand it. It's normally the Friday before the meeting. It is cutoff, but
No, I understand completely, and I generally I agree. It is appropriate for everyone to have a chance to read this stuff ahead of time. I don't have any problem with that whatsoever.
Thank you. So the public hearing will be, help me, Julie. Let me get my calendar up.
It will be Tuesday, 22nd. Yeah.
Yep, it'll be the September 22nd at 7 o'clock.
At 7, okay.
Right. There will be a 15-minute pause at 8 o'clock for a regular meeting. All materials must be in by the end of business on Wednesday, September 16th.
Great.
Okay?
Okay.
So I need a motion to continue the public hearing, please.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Good night, everybody.
Good
Have a good ravioli. See you all later.
Good night.
All right.